kind of mingle, have some breakfast, and just celebrate we're finally here.
Finally, here. A senior.
It's crazy. Everyone tells you it'll get here fast and you don't believe them, and then
We're gonna leave it there. So mute and unmute.
Good evening, everyone. I'm calling to order the Douglas County School District Board of Education meeting for August 20th at 6:02 p.m. We'll begin with roll call. Chancho Shore. Here. Graziano is absent and excused. Holtzman.
here.
Lemieux.
Here.
Lung.
Yeah.
Ray is here, and Vogel.
Here.
At this time, we will, while you guys are entering, you can go ahead and stay standing as we recite the Pledge of Allegiance. Next on our agenda is our favorite agenda item regarding student and staff recognitions. Dr. Tucker. Huh? I don't know. Oh. Let's go up the dais. Why don't you go next? Chantra showed it last time.
Good evening.
Let me try this again. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Tammy, I think it's working now. Well, as you know, the 2019-20 school year is well underway. And the start of the school year is the most enjoyable time for me. And parents, let me see your hands. I'm pretty sure it's a great start for you, right? Oh, darn. A lot of parents are. It's a great start for students to get back to school and another year of great learning. So let's take a little time to watch a video here. First day of school.
As the new school year dawns, thoughts often turn to setting goals.
It's beautiful.
This is Castleview's Senior Sunrise.
We have all of the class of 2020 for their senior year to do posters where we can have our handprints, kind of mingle, have some breakfast, and just celebrate we're finally here.
Finally, here. A senior.
It's crazy. Everyone tells you it'll get here fast and you don't believe them, and then next thing you know,
and you're like, oh,
you're here.
The goals here vary.
I'm taking a bunch of hard classes. I'm actually really excited to be taking them.
get all A's.
Get good enough grades that my GPA goes up a little.
It's the latest round of aspirations that looked a lot different 12 years ago.
Time's going by really quickly. I still remember kindergarten.
I'm gonna make mine the tallest one of all.
Some kindergartners are looking for comfort.
Nearest shelter cell tower.
Comfort to help them get through the obstacles they're sure to face.
Any dangerous storms heading this way, like tornadoes or hurricanes.
Along the way,
First grade,
milestones begin to add up.
it's our 30th year anniversary for Rock Ridge Elementary.
We are
Today, I'm challenging everybody here to put forth their best effort every single day.
Proud parents find themselves trying to hold it all together.
This is our middle, so we have one more coming. He's going to either rule this place or burn it down, my youngest.
Finding a good balance is key in middle school. Balance between the games of childhood and the challenges of the years that follow.
Hello, Legend High School! We're going to bring the freshmen in here. Going to be positive, good energy with everything.
Unity. It's the goal that helps all the others happen.
Ready?
Just show like our class together.
So if the goal is to get out,
Basketball games, football games,
Go to everything.
then do it. One more time. Together.
senior year.
Yeah, it's exciting stuff.
As the new school year dawns, thoughts
Each year, when we kick off the start of the school year, the cabinet members, board members, and I take great pleasure in spending the entire morning going to each school. And that's just a small snippet of what happens in all of our campuses, every aspect of our district. So that's what we call our unity of purpose. And we're looking for this to be an absolute great year. Now let's move on to student recognitions. That's why we're here. Now, I understand, Mr. Weaver, some great things happened over the summer in Maryland while many students and staff were just taking it easy over the break. You want to come up and your staff want to come up and tell us about a great thing that happened with our Technology Student Association. Okay. Sure. So would you be kind to introduce your staff and students and tell us a little bit about it?
Okay, I'm going to introduce Mr. Allison, and then we'll make the guys. I told them they had to talk, so we're going to make them say something else. This is Ken Allison and his wife, Katie Allison. Katie teaches math at our school, and Kent is our engineering teacher. They've developed an incredible program, and they took a group of kids to nationals this year, and I'll let Kent do the rundown of what happened there.
And Kent, I understand maybe first, second, or third place? First place. Round of applause.
No, we were so excited. This is I could not be prouder of these group of guys here. They were hardest working guys I've worked with in TSA, and they produced some amazing things. They competed in at the state level, and kind of there was some drama around it a little bit, and didn't work out how they wanted to, but they ended up taking it to nationals and winning nationals with it. So just amazing group. So I'll let them introduce themselves and kind of tell them a little bit about what you guys did as your project. If you see it, it's on YouTube. Is it under, what's the Thummy, is it Thummy Thummerton? Okay. Really cool. So top notch. Here we go. Trevor Fox.
All right, I'm Trevor Fox. And so what we did, we had to base our movie off a mockumentary. So we decided to do it off the world of sports. And specifically, we chose thumb wrestling to sort of mock the sports documentaries.
I'm Cade McKenna. I just wanted to say that DCSD got me into the film program, and what we went for was film. And I want to pursue film as a career, and it's really my passion. And what we did at TSA was really awesome, and it really helped pursue and further my goals and aspirations in the film industry. Yeah.
Hi everyone, my name is Ben McMahon. So unfortunately, the rest of the team wasn't able to actually travel to nationals this year, but I was. I had a really fun time going, and you know, Mr. and Miss Allison have provided us with a great opportunity to go on these trips and do these awesome conferences. We had a lot of other teams who did well also. I had to do a lot of interviews and stuff while I was there to finish off the event, but it was a tough thing that we did, but I'm proud that we were able to do it, and we put in a lot of work this year to do better than what we did last year.
Hi, my name is Christian Lau. I'm a senior at Mountain Vista. And I just want to give a huge shout out and thank you to the Allisons and Douglas County for placing such a, just caring so much about CTE education and valuing learning both in and outside of the classroom and just allowing us to grow in our technical skills as we head towards college.
Hi, I'm Nathan Gossett, and this was my first year of TSA, and all of my friends were doing it before me, and I'm like, wow, this club seems really cool, so I joined, and the first day was just really cool. It was really hands-on, and I just really loved it, and we just made a bunch of films, and so I also thank DCSD for implementing such a cool program into our school, and that I was able to discover it and, do it, so.
I'm Katie Allison. We are proud of these guys, and we just thank them and thank you guys for supporting CTE and the CTSO that goes with it, which is TSA, even though I teach math, but we do thank you for that. So.
Now, I understand some other student participants are not here tonight and a coordinator, or is everyone here tonight?
Well, we have other teams that participated with us. We took 9 kids to nationals, and we had a great showing, actually. But this is our first place team, and it's our first in nationals. So we were, yeah.
Okay.
So
A first place. Let's give them a round of applause. Yeah. Before we do our photo op, I'm sure Director Lemieux has a few comments and a couple certificates. Is that correct?
First of all, congratulations. First place at Nationals is an incredible accomplishment. But I also heard you said 4th place, 9th place, and 10th place as well. Incredible. So congratulations. That speaks a lot to the quality of employees that we have that really care about our kids. And we are continuing to support any of that programming. That's why we do what we do, so we can get you guys the resources you need. So congratulations. That's amazing.
Yes. Yeah. Photo op. Nate is here to take a quick photo of us. Way to go, guys. Congratulations. Way to go. Good job.
Congratulations.
Thanks, Ken. Way to go.
Great job. Good job, you guys.
Okay, this wraps up our student and staff recognition. We'll now turn it back over to the board.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tucker, and thank you, parents and students, for sharing the good news. Next on our agenda is the acceptance of the agenda. Is there a motion?
Make a motion to accept the agenda.
Second.
Holtzman motioned, Vogel seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, let's vote. Chancho Shore?
Aye.
Holtzman?
Aye.
Lemieux?
Aye.
Lung?
Aye.
Ray, aye, and Vogel.
Aye.
Next on our agenda is public comment. The board values hearing diverse viewpoints from a broad spectrum of citizens throughout our community, specifically items listed on tonight's agenda and on issues that impact the educational needs of our students. 2 policies guide how public comment to the board is received. Board Policy KE, Public Complaints, and Board Policy BEDH, Public Participation at Board Meetings. Board Policy KE outlines the process for responding to grievances and complaints and explains the board believes that complaints and grievances are best handled and resolved as close to the origin of concern as possible. Policy BEDH also explains that since the board's responsibility is setting policy for the school district, members of the public school should direct their comments to policy matters, and notes further that citizens are strongly encouraged to contact the teacher, building principal, or superintendent first with questions or concern. The board would like for all discourse in this room to occur in an atmosphere of mutual respect. Everyone in this room plays an important part in modeling appropriate behavior and promoting a climate of mutual respect. To maintain this decorum of respect, I would ask that speakers refrain from using individual names in an offensive manner, as this only distracts from the issue of concern. Throughout the board meeting, the board follows Robert's Rules of Order to guide it in participating in an orderly and fair conducted meeting. Under those rules, if a director calls for a point of order, all discussions and comments should stop so that a determination can be made as to whether a procedural rule or board policy has been violated. Therefore, if a point of order is made while public comments are being made, a speaker should stop until otherwise directed to continue. Each speaker tonight is allotted up to 3 minutes to address the board. Please know that this is our time to just listen without engaging in discussion. However, your comments will be reflected upon as we discuss this agenda item that you are addressing. So now as we proceed with public comment, I would like to have these folks come forward, and then we will always call the person that follows. So the Porter family, Sarah Porter, Mark Porter, Corey Porter, feel free to come up to the front row, and then we will start with Sarah, and followed by Mark, and then followed by Cody. My apologies, Corey.
I'm always first to sign up. So here we are, pretty much exactly a year later, 1 year to the date, and you all still refuse our request to update the JLCDB medical cannabis policy. It's clear that the parents here are the only ones in this room that want to work to achieve positive change for Benjamin Juan and our daughter Marley. We are so disappointed and dissatisfied that we have been transparent, we've been honorable, and we have not been treated with the same integrity. This is about chronically ill, special needs students who have life-threatening illnesses. This is about children being excluded from their right to a free public education because you don't want to change a policy that there are clear guidelines in place for. And Benjamin Juan's life is at risk every day that he is in your schools without his rescue medicine. None of you board members can admit this or say those words out loud, can you? Marley Porter's health is already precarious, and she will decline over the next few months, forcing us to keep her home so that she can have access to her medical cannabis. I challenge all of you to put yourselves in my shoes, my husband's shoes. Are you allowed to leave your office, your meetings, your appointments, your agendas, so that you can go to the school and give your child their medicine? Can you leave work for an hour or more every day to do this 5 days a week? Dr. Tucker, you gonna let everybody leave work for an hour or more to go give their kids medicine if they need to? I don't think you all could do that. I will never stop saying that by not updating the JLCDB policy, that you are knowingly excluding and discriminating against Marley Porter and Benjamin Juan and other kids like them and their right to a free, appropriate public education. I think that you all need to do your jobs and vote on this. If it's 1 student, 10 students, 300 students, if you can't handle taking care of them, how are you going to handle taking care of the other 68,000 students in this county?
Thank you, Mrs. Porter. Mark Porter is up next, and after Mark again is Corey.
Good evening, Mark Porter from Castle Rock. I'm here again to request an update to policy JLCDB. For over a year now, we have requested this change and have been denied for a number of reasons. Information has been provided to rebut and clarify said reasons, but yet the same reasons are given. Unreal. So I turn to all of you. Help, please. My daughter Marley is 13 years old and suffers from severe Crohn's disease. We treat her disease with cannabis oil 4 times a day as prescribed, which requires her to take her medicine at school. Under current policy, only my wife and I can administer her medicine. A law was passed last year that would allow school personnel to give my daughter her medicine. But this board won't even vote. President Ray will tell you all after this public comment session, and I quote from last public comment, "We will not change the policy as we are happy with it." Happy with it. Unreal. So you're happy that the current policy puts students at risk. You're happy that the undercurrent policy, if Benjamin Wan has a seizure, his life-saving medicine is not there to save his life. Happy that my daughter may not receive her medicine as prescribed due to mom and dad having to work and unable to get there. Real life problems. There was a law passed that allows you to change the policy, but you won't. Eagle County did. I don't know how they did it. Wow. Why? Do they not receive the same funding as you guys? Do they not abide by the same Colorado and federal law that you guys abide by? Of course they do, and you know it. And you knowingly sit there and be ignorant. I know you wish we would give up and go away. No way, no how. I'm just getting warmed up. My daughter has fought for the last 7 years and continues to fight every day, and I will fight for her. Every day. I stand with Marley. I stand with Ben. I stand with all the kids that your ignorance neglects. Update the power.
Thank you, Mr. Porter. Is Corey Porter here? Nope. All right. Daniel Jensen. After Daniel Jensen is Amber Wan. Is Daniel Jensen here? Right, Amber Wan, and then after Amber is Brad Wan.
Good evening, board directors. I'd like to address the comments made by board president after each public comment. When we request an update of the JLCDB policy, he states that the board is not going to revisit or request that the school district administration and board find that the current policy is sufficient and remains as is. But it's a false statement to claim that this is it, because it doesn't go far enough in cases of emergencies. I can tell you that we are not satisfied with the outcome, hence why we keep returning and requesting an update. As you know, the law was passed, and that would give districts the ability to opt in and update the JLCDB policy, which is what we will remain to ask for until it is implemented. Here is why. The current JLCDB policy is, or as I said, does not go far enough in cases of an emergency, which should be top priority for anyone on this board and in the district administration and any school personnel. The school district's current emergency plan for kids with epilepsy is not our plan. So how will the school district address the risks as they do for kids they have no idea will ever go into anaphylactic shock, yet the school district stores medication in the presumptive measure to be proactive to save a child's life. But when a family comes to you and says that my child has epilepsy, which is a life-threatening seizure disorder for most with the diagnosis because it's medical cannabis, we all get to be stonewalled by the very person set up in the district as compliance officer for non-discrimination and ADA is none other than our assistant superintendent, and the one that our school board and current superintendent put in charge of our request a year ago. The very person discriminating against our children and never had any intentions to help kids. We have provided supporting documentation from our son's prescribing physician to use medical cannabis in the form of a nasal rescue spray, but the current policy will not allow it to be on school grounds to be used by school personnel in which it was designed for immediate emergency relief. So what is the district going to do about this still? Daring us to sue the district does not help our son before he graduates in May with a lengthy lawsuit and wouldn't help the other kids. Just to prove that a judge ruling that the district's choices are wrong, we don't need to pay for a judge to tell us what the court of public opinion can see for themselves, whether you decide to change your minds and actually help kids. The ball is in your court again, Dr. Tucker. Hashtag I stand with Ben.
Thank you, Ms. Wan. Brad Wan. After Brad is Kenda Green Newman.
Good evening, Douglas County School Board. My name is Brad Wan. I'm a resident here in Highlands Ranch. My son is Benjamin Wan. We are here to talk about changing the medical cannabis policy. It has been just over a year since we originally approached you with this topic. So the last 2 weeks of last year's school, my son's medicine was placed on his principal's desk. It was received for 217 hours, night and day, for 2 straight weeks. My son's life-saving medicine stayed up at school. No federal involvement, no loss of funding, no sheriff's department, no nothing other than a safe environment for my son. We asked for a meeting with the school district over the summer, and all we got was excuses. We were told that we were on vacation. They were on vacation. They're out of town, in committees, anything they could do to not meet with us. My wife on Tuesday, prior to the start of school, came up here and told you the medicine was going to be back to school, and it did. It was received by the school, checked in by the school, and kept at the school. I returned home, and I got a threatening phone call from the assistant superintendent, who explained to me that if this medicine came back to the school grounds, Douglas County School District would serve my wife and I with a no trespassing warrant to not come back to school grounds. So you're willing to place my son in grave danger before by not allowing a rescue medication on school grounds. Why is that? We had an agreement that the medicine would stay with my son and we would pick it up at the end of the day. By 2:30, 15 minutes before my son gets out of school, you had an armed security guards come to my house to deliver my lawful medicine for my son to our home, separating him from the only thing that can save his life. I immediately called the head SRO, Sergeant Tucker, who informed me that the school district called him to escort my son's medicine to our house. The head resource officer informed the school district that they would not, that the medicine is my son's property. The property is obtained legally, and this is breaking no laws. That the superintendent and assistant superintendent took it upon themselves to put hundreds of kids, at risk while security guards left school, left kids unprotected to come to my house to deliver something we were picking up 15 minutes later. So let me explain to you the importance of all this. The sheriff's department has told you that my son's medicine is lawful. They have told you that he is breaking no laws. He is not a criminal. He has lawfully obtained his medication, and that we are not breaking any laws other than school policy. We're asking you to change this policy because we stand with Benjamin. And shame on you guys, honestly. You have absolutely no ground to stand on. You're hiding policy inside the school website. You need to expose it. You're breaking state law. Go read it. Mary, same with you. You know where it's at. We called the school district. We asked them where it was, and they couldn't find it.
Mr. Wan, thank you. Next is Kenda Green Newman. After Kenda Green Newman is Judy Reynolds.
I'm here tonight to ask the board to make a revision to its JLCDB policy to include provisions to allow for the storage and administering of cannabinoid-based medications in Douglas County schools. Our journey with epilepsy started 9 years ago. Our perfectly healthy daughter deteriorated into a sick, scared little girl who is suffering from upwards of 15 seizures a day. Throughout her life, our daughter has tried 4 different seizure medications. Some have caused severe rashes. One has caused her to have suicidal thoughts. All of her medications have become less effective over time, which is a common occurrence in epileptics, and it causes breakthrough seizures for her. We've gotten calls from her older sister, from her friends at school, from school nurses. We drive to school, pick her up, or treat her with emergency meds, and pray that she never suffers from a grand mal seizure, or worse, SUDEP, which is unexplained death in epilepsy. Traditional pharmaceuticals alone are failing our daughter, and we need a better solution. But as a Douglas County school student who wants to legally choose the use of cannabinoids, she would be breaking the district policy and subject to legal action, a child. I am failing to understand the separation between cannabinoid and traditional medications in regards to this policy. JLCDB clearly states that the policy will be upheld according to state law, yet the board cites federal law as a reason not to update the policy. In addition, a nurse has not always been available to administer my child's emergency meds at school, but someone other than myself has. Why would a cannabinoid medicine be any different? It's legal under state law, and definitely appears that the failure to even consider updates to this current policy are based in politics and misrepresentation of facts and laws rather than an obligation to, and I quote a lawyer from the district, support the learning and well-being of every student in this district. There are parents in schools all over that feel just like I do. I have a job that connects me with children with disabilities, and today I met a beautiful young girl and her mother. The daughter suffers from severe disabilities, including epilepsy, and has a severe resistance to traditional drugs and emergency seizure treatments. On the verge of tears, that mother told me that she didn't want to give up hope that a cannabinoid medicine would be better for her daughter, but her desire to be in compliance with district policies, and more importantly, her fear that her child would not be properly treated at school and would die from a seizure, were keeping her from seeking additional treatment. She told me she feels discriminated against and fears retribution if she stands out against this policy. No student or parent should be discriminated against or villainized because we make a medical choice that is in the best benefit of our child. So I'm asking you to please consider a revision. I stand with Ben and Marley and Emily and all the kids in this district that you let down if you don't open your mind and consider it.
Thank you, Mrs. Newman. Judy Reynolds. After Judy is Matthew Solak.
Good evening, members of the board, Dr. Tucker. My name's Judy Reynolds. I'm a parent of 2 current Douglas County students and 1 Douglas County high school graduate, and also the former vice president of this board. I'm here tonight to ask you to revise board policy JLCBD. When this policy was introduced and passed in July of 2016, it was groundbreaking in that Douglas County was the 2nd district in the state to pass such a policy. The policy was the result of Jack's Law being passed by the legislature earlier that year. This policy came into being because of the request of parents in the district whose students needed medical marijuana or hemp products as part of their daily medical regimens. Then, just as now, there was pushback and concern from the staff. But this was, and it is, about what's doing best for students. Now, because there have been changes to the statute by the legislature in 2018, it's time to update the policy. This is a health and safety issue for these students, and it's time to make changes to the policy that will benefit them. Allowing students to receive their medication as needed by a medical professional or in an emergent situation simply makes sense. It is how any other prescription medicine is handled by the staff, and these students and their parents deserve access to their medication when they need it. These medicines are no different than those carried by students who have an EpiPen or a rescue inhaler. They are life-saving medications that need to be administered in a timely manner, or there may be dire health consequences for the student. Time is of the essence in an emergency health situation, and these students need their medications available to them. It is time to truly advocate for all students and change the policy so that it is in line with the current state statute and guidelines. It is clear that this minority of students is not having their needs met, and their ability to take and use their physician-prescribed medications is being impeded. For these students, it is a health and safety issue. The initial policy was passed by a 6-0 vote, including 3 members of this current board. The board is currently reviewing and revising policy. Why is this policy not being updated and reviewed? A policy that was originally designed to help students and now can be revised to help them more. Over the course of the last 2 years, I have heard a great deal from this board and superintendent about unity of purpose and assuring the community that they can and will meet the needs of all students who attend Douglas County schools. This is an opportunity to show the community that you can and do care for those students who face daily challenges that most of us can't even imagine by simply giving them access to their medication at school. Please do the right thing for these students and update policy JLCBD. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Reynolds. Matthew Solak. After Matthew is Gary Colley.
Hello. Thank you, Board of Directors, Dr. Tucker, and staff for allowing me to speak today. My name is Matthew Solak, and I have been teaching Chinese at Legend High School since it opened in 2008 and have been a proud member of the Douglas County Federation since new teacher orientation my first day as a teacher. My daughter attends Cimarron Middle School as an 8th grader and will be coming to Legend next year. I want you to know that the Douglas County Federation is an organization of teachers and staff who support the board and statements and appreciate the work the directors and superintendent have done to help rebuild the district out of the mess that was left behind by the previous board. It is not easy work. The board has brought back respect, transparency, and rational decision-making, which has helped begin to heal our community, and for that, we thank you for all your work. There is still a lot of work to be done, and teachers and staff would like a stronger, more meaningful voice in how we implement policies to achieve the board and statements. This is why on the June 4th board meeting, we presented the board with petitions signed by over 3,700 teachers and staff asking for a collective bargaining agreement. But I'm afraid there were some misunderstandings about the nature of this action, which I would like to clear up. The word petition often has negative connotations, like we are petitioning against something. But a petition is not necessarily a negative thing. It is simply asking for something. In this case, we are asking for what every other school district in the metro area has, collective bargaining. Why a petition? We used a petition with signatures because in order to ask for collective bargaining, we must demonstrate to you and the community that the majority of teachers and staff who would be affected by a collective bargaining agreement actually support being represented by such an agreement. It would have been irresponsible for us to ask for collective bargaining without demonstrating strong support among those represented by the agreement. We demonstrated over 60% support among all staff affected and over 70% support of certified teachers. That is a huge number of teachers and staff who want to be represented by collective bargaining agreement. And we respectfully ask the board to consider giving teachers and staff a strong collaborative voice for the future of our district, because this will give teachers and staff ownership, which will benefit all students and the community as a whole. This is a positive petition. We are asking to be more involved. This is a good thing. We support all the work you're doing. We hope you can support the 3,700 voices who want to be heard and involved in the future of our district. We have good ideas and simply want a stronger voice in how we achieve what we all want, the best district possible for our students. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Solak. Gary Colley. After Gary Colley is Amy DeBroni.
You're gonna have to start till she gets that thing around to you guys.
Okay.
Plus I have to
why you stall?
remember what I'm supposed to do when I'm up here. Well, members of the board, feels like it's been a while since I've been up here. I want to make sure that my comments are, there's too much to cover. For example, I put down, I like to address 3 topics on the agenda, and there's others, of course, but I'm really going to just address 2. And I tried to put some notes here in a way that when you're going through your work session, you might be able to refer to them. Also, Kathy Lees was somebody who's very instrumental in helping the CAC, not just Kathy, but this past year on helping to develop a complaint process that's effective for parents, and hopefully the same thing is happening for staff. The first thing I wanted to address was item 16, where it has the parent engagement update. And the first is just a bullet point that they're asking people that want to know more about the county to sign up to be a cohort, or to join the cohort. And I did that today, because I think any parent or community member who wants to proactively engage in the district, they need to proactively engage in understanding how the district functions. So I put my name on that list, not that I'm looking for more to do. On the School Accountability Committee's part, when they talk about updating SAC resources, creating SAC training video modules, and looking at that, I'd really like to commend Matt Reynolds for the UIP improvement, the SAC role in the Unified School Improvement Plan. And the budget's not ready, so he didn't address that. But this has been lacking for quite some time, where parents who join SAC don't know how to engage in an effective discussion. What do they ask a principal? What is a principal supposed to give a SAC in a reasonable time, et cetera? And I think what Matt did in that video is exactly what is needed, especially the follow-up on it. Then also SAC trainings for school leaders at district leadership team meetings. There's different things that are noted there, but one of the questions I had regarding elections is my understanding, I know we've got SAC bylaws because the CAC helped to revise them, but my understanding is that there's possibly a board policy that suggests that principals can choose voting members to serve on SAC. And if that's true, that should be revised right off the bat, because the community, the superintendent doesn't choose board members. The community should choose SAC voting members. I don't know if that's true, but I think it should be checked. Also, on the Unified School Improvement and Budget, the parent engagement, complaints, and customer service portion of it, they suggest a SAC responsibility survey, but also, this is very key, I think, from the CAC perspective, explore SAC monitoring process. How can you effectively monitor 61 SACs functioning the way they are supposed to per your bylaws? And when they're not monitoring it properly, how can that be corrected? Almost done. On the complaint process, if Kathy was here, she'd talk about this. The only thing I question here is if you look at the levels in the complaint process, the 3rd level is the final level, right? That also says the superintendent decision at level 3 is final. Well, that takes the Board of Education out of the equation if it's a significant issue like it was with a high school in a compliance issue with SAC. Just asking you to consider that. And the only thing on the strategic plan update is one of the things that says implementation, performance, and indicators to monitor progress. We need a proactive way to monitor progress on how parents and communities are involved in our school district. Thank you for letting me go over.
Thank you, Mr. Colley. Amy DeBroni? I got the name right, yes. After how many times, Amy?
Evening. Do you want me to wait, Tammy? You'll note that there's a card on top there. That's from my daughter. She couldn't be here tonight, but she wrote you a card. Good evening, members of the board. I'm here tonight on behalf of DC Kid to give you an update on the work of the district's dyslexia work group. A year ago, my daughter stood in front of this board and Dr. Tucker and asks that you help teach our teachers about dyslexia. She asks this to help ensure children who have this learning difference receive what they needed to be able to pursue their life goals, and that maybe they did not have to suffer the emotional and mental health issues that many dyslexic students struggle immensely with. In October of 2018, we began offering dyslexia simulations to the districts and its charter. In that time, a total of 590 individuals from DCSD have participated, including 4 of you, the REDAC coordinators, the neighborhood school principals, 3 charter schools, 7 neighborhood schools, and teachers and leaders from the Summer Summit. We have 6 simulations scheduled so far this fall. These simulations help to simulate what it feels like to have dyslexia, ADHD, working memory and processing deficits, as well as dysgraphia, conditions that impact 1 in 5 individuals. Since January of this year, and under the leadership of our new Chief Academic Officer, Ms. Gross-Taylor, and her team at CPIG, they have put forth a truly amazing effort in what can be held up as an ideal in collaboration with us at DC Kid. And while I don't want to underemphasize the amount of work left to do, and much of it part of the strategic plan for the district, the work is already notable and commendable. For example, the team has created a dyslexia plan for the district as part of the overall strategic plan. They have streamlined communication by assigning a dyslexia contact for each school building and publishing a DCSD Dyslexia Digest monthly starting in September. They have developed professional development, which includes guidance on saying the word dyslexia, one of our big asks, and identifying students with a dyslexia profile. They are developing a dyslexia support protocol with a consistent process and language across the district for identifying students with a dyslexia profile. They have trained at least 1 person in Orton-Gillingham through a 1-week class in every neighborhood elementary school in the district and are developing a consortium to continue to support and mentor those trained. Recently, while Dr. Reagan, the district's new dyslexia contact, was presenting to teachers, the parent volunteers who came to help, I'm almost done, facilitate the simulations were demonstrably moved, stating, "Wow, am I hearing this right? Can this be?" with tears streaming down some of their faces, admittedly, mine included. We know that making changes within a district this large is like trying to move a ship the size of the Titanic with a piece of floss. However, we look forward to working towards it continuing to move in a good direction. We will continue to partner and support the district in the work ahead. This work is meaningful to us as parents that have watched our kids struggle, and it continues to be so. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Dubroni. So we will conclude public comment at this time. The next on our agenda is adoption of consent agenda items. We have 4 items. One is to adopt the 2019-20 Master Capital Plan, the IGA between Elbert County and the school district, the IGA between the Douglas County Clerk regarding the coordinated election. We will be removing item number 12, Board Directors, for further revision. So that item will be removed for a later time, probably in September. And then also the resolution authorizing the acquisition acceptance of certain real property. Those items are on our consent agenda. Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion made by Vogel, seconded by Holtzman. Any further discussion? Seeing none, let's vote. Chancho Shore.
Aye.
Holtzman. Lemieux. Lung. Ray, aye, and Vogel.
Aye.
Next on our agenda is the adoption of the unofficial minutes.
I move to adopt the unofficial minutes.
Motion made by Holtzman, seconded by Lemieux. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Chancho Shore.
Aye.
Holtzman.
Aye.
Lemieux.
Aye.
Lung.
Aye.
Ray, aye, and Vogel.
Aye.
Okay. Next on our agenda is the superintendent's report. Dr. Tucker, I understand we have a couple of items that we're interested in, but we will turn this time over to you at this time.
Thank you, and will be very thorough and as brief as I possibly can. A along with a couple of my colleagues, three things to talk about. As we've expressed to the community, the school district, the board, and the entire school district are very grateful for the opportunity to partner with our county commissioners to address the physical safety of our school district as well as the mental health aspect of it. As we know that the monies will be made available via applications. The commissioners have been very clear. The school districts will make applications as a whole. Our charter schools, private and parochial schools throughout the entire county will make individual applications, meaning that our charter schools will draft individual applications for monies to address some of the needs that are in their respective buildings. Also, through the passage of 5A and 5B, particularly with 5B, we're taking care of some bond needs for all of our campuses throughout the district. Mr. Cosgrove and his team did a wonderful job in identifying some of those things. So the money from the county commissioners is greatly needed. I'm going to ask Mr. Knight to talk a little bit about what the IGA looks like. That's the intergovernmental agreement. Some of those things, because of safety and security reasons, we cannot articulate exactly what they are. We're going to keep the conversation at a very high level as it relates to some of the safety and security things. And so it'll be a joint intergovernmental agreement, one application for both mental health and physical security. Mr. Knight, talk a little bit about, if you would, the physical security.
Thank you, Dr. Tucker. Board, we have been working with a group of folks that came from the two county commissioner breakout groups, one for physical safety and one for psychological safety. On the psychological safety front, we're looking at anything from school climate surveys to where we're asking students about how they feel about the climate in their building, social emotional learning curriculum so that we're teaching students, curriculum for suicide prevention and assessment training, crisis response preparation. So 2 or 3 different systemic curriculums that we would have across the district, as well as the funds to support the training. From a physical safety side, we've tried to do 2 things. One, take some of the recommendations that came from that physical safety committee, along with recommendations that we have added just last month to the master capital plan, things that our safety and security team sees that we need to do over the next few years. We won't go into a lot of details on those, but they are, again, kind of our traditional building hardening, communication, and training for folks so that we can continue to provide an even safer physical space for our students.
Thank you, Mr. Knight. Again, what is the deadline in, is it September or October for these IGAs?
I believe it is September. I'm looking to see if Rich is out there.
Yeah.
I believe it's around September 10th.
Okay, and we're on target to meet the deadline.
That is correct.
Okay, we will meet the deadline. A couple other things. The board has emphasized through its sub-ends and also through with conversations with me during my evaluation that we continue to have school climate surveys. So on the mental health end, we will utilize some funds for school climate surveys. Also funds to support a marketing campaign of what we're doing, again, at a very high level with our standard response protocol, which we use throughout the district at all of our campuses here. Then also expanding text-to-tip as well that we use here in the district. A couple other things, Ted may have mentioned this, curriculum for suicide prevention and assessment training, PD, that will go along with that. Then also funds to support training for school-based staff as well. Sometimes we forget about our staff, so we want to make sure we do that on the mental health end. And real quickly, I had the pleasure today of sitting on a panel with 5 other superintendents across the state, and we testified before our lawmakers. There's a committee of lawmakers that represent both houses about school safety, and they wanted to know what was the state of security across the great state of Colorado in our respective schools and what they could do to further increased security. So we're very pleased that the state is interested, and we also ask for additional funding as well. Any questions about that item?
Well, Dr. Dyer, I just want to, I know I had a chance to talk to some of the commissioners, and I just want to express our gratitude to them as well for understanding the hypersensitivity that we have around sharing details about our safety strategies. And for the public, we say this word IGA, but it's an intergovernmental agreement. So whenever two governmental entities want to come together for a common purpose, that's the kind of plan we've developed. It's the plan we've developed for our SROs for many years as well. But I'm grateful that they understood our concern about the application process as being way too visible to the wrong people, that it really needed to be something that was secure so that we weren't compromising the safety of our students. So thanks. So if you see them, as I have already, please thank them for their understanding and willingness to work with us with that kind of an agreement. What else? Questions, Director Lemieux?
Thank you. I'm going to ask about communication. I'm getting some questions from schools around me, from SAC families that are wondering if they can request the district for certain things for their schools. How is that being communicated to our school leaders so they can let their school communities know that this is going to be an application made by the district rather than individual school basis, with the understanding that we have absolutely no control over who gets that funding? That's 100% up to the Board of County Commissioners, and we have no control over it, and it's 101 schools that are all going to be applying for it. So what kind of communication do we have going out about that?
Okay.
Director Lemieux, we have sent out a list of talking points to all of our principals. So my suggestion would be to have those community members reach out directly to their principals. They are aware that we're making one application, and they have a good grasp on what they can share and what they can't. So they're well informed about how we're moving forward.
And we have another district leadership team meeting with all of our district leaders, and many of our charter school leaders do attend DLT. And the top thing that I'm going to talk about when I address the group is the application process, the status of the application process, and we'll certainly emphasize a couple points that we will continue to figure out along the way.
Other questions? Director Lung?
I have the honor to talk to commissioners on the weekend, and I do tell him how grateful it is for the opportunity to apply. I get a couple questions from some of the community. Would like Dr. Kurt or your staff to clarify. One, so this process is open to all the students, including private school students. And what if the amount that the district apply and the other entity apply exceeding the amount that the county commissioner allocate? Does the county commissioner indicate how they're going to distribute the money? Is it based on first come, first serve, or is it based on, because we have 60,000 students in our school district, and there's only 3,000 private school students, they are going to prorate this so that we get large amount of the money? So that's question number one. If the amount is exceeding what they have, how are they going to appropriate the money?
To answer both questions, I don't want to speak for the county commissioners, but in a meeting that Director Ray and I believe another director had with at least a county commissioner, Laura Thomas, and at that time, this was a couple weeks ago, that they're still trying to figure those logistics out in terms of how the money will be distributed. Director Ray,
You're absolutely correct. And we can't, as Dr. Tucker said, we can't speak on behalf of them. So that would be a question that they would need to direct to the commissioners.
So is this something that we will follow up and clarify with them so that the committee understand that better, that just because we apply, we may not get the amount that we wish? And I think there's a genuine confusion and see who is in charge of this, which Director Lemieux pointed very clearly that it is in the ball of the county commissioner. We can apply, but we have no say whether we're going to get a dime or $1 million or 10 million or things. So I think the community need to hear from us because there's generally confusions that whether we will apply, how much we will apply, and who's going to get how much.
We're definitely going to apply. We're definitely going to meet the deadline, and we definitely can use those resources in our school district to complement, again, the community's generous support of 5A and 5B. In terms of the distribution, again, I don't want to comment on that. However, my expectation is in the next couple of days and weeks prior to submitting the application, we'll have a better handle on how the money will be distributed, whether it'll be distributed based on the size of our district versus independent, parochial, private, and our charter schools.
Any other questions for Dr. Tucker about this topic? All right, Dr. Tucker, you're on for the next.
Yes, I want to talk about a couple things here, and I'm going to be very quick, and I do apologize that they happen to dovetail with some of the comments that some of our speakers made, so I don't want anyone to think that I'm addressing their comments now, but these were things that I wanted to talk about. First thing, the strategic plan. I've had the fortune of being involved as a teacher and in various roles in strategic planning, and you've heard me say on multiple times, I've not been in a district where we have garnered this much input, where the process has been so thorough, and we've respected and honored the input of all of our stakeholders. And again, that's a big thank you to Marlena and her staff, all the administrators and teachers, and really the whole family, the whole village here in Douglas County for your input. And I think that deserves a huge celebration. It's been nearly a decade, probably longer, since we've had an opportunity to have a direction in terms of how the entire district is moving forward. We have the pleasure of the board setting that direction in your end goals that really was the impetus. It gave us a tremendous start to begin our strategic planning. And we're fortunate. We're in a great school district, a great county. Do we have our challenges? Do we have all the answers? No, we don't. You heard that tonight. But it's time to celebrate our direction. It's been a while since we've had a unified direction. So on September 20th, we're going to roll out our strategic plan, and we're going to invite all of our teaching staff, support staff, administrative staff, board, what have you. And we're going to do this at the Pepsi Center. And some of you are going to say, oh my God, you're doing this at the Pepsi Center. Folks, we have tremendous business support, tremendous corporate support that has been untapped here. And that's not a negative statement. I'm not saying that we've gone years and haven't capitalized on it, but I can certainly tell you we're going to capitalize on it. We've raised over $18,000 to launch to date, and we still have until September 20th. Is that correct, Marlena? So that's going to cover the discounted rate of the Pepsi Center. And I want to be real clear with folks. It's going to be $9,200. We've already raised that money, and any money over $9,200 will go towards the celebration and really celebrating all of our heroes, especially our drivers. To date, 130 plus drivers have signed up to drive our staff to and from the Pepsi Center. So September 20th, 9 a.m. Yes, that's a round of applause, yes. And then later on in October, we'll have our community rollout at Legend High School. Marlena, am I missing something? Any points you would like to add? Okay, Legend High School, Chaparral High School. So there you go. See, you have to surround yourself around smart people. So I'm just really excited about that, and excited that our corporate sponsors, our business folks, are underwriting a big part of this. As we bring our staff together, for the first time in years. So I'm excited about that. Any questions, Board of Directors?
Board directors?
Well, there's one thing after you finish, well, I might as well say, there will be a dance-off between the cabinet and the board.
Is
So
that
be
right?
prepared on that September 20th to get us started. Yes.
We're ready.
So get ready for the dance-off.
No, I would just say, Dr. Tucker, we're definitely excited. Like you said, it's I can't think of, well, I can think of the last time that we pulled all our folks together under one roof, and that's been at least, I want to say 15 years ago. And so we're long due to really show that we are Douglas County. We're unified for a common purpose for our kids. And so pleased to hear that this is not going to take any funds away from our general fund or anywhere else other than our businesses being able to support and celebrate with us. So
That's the
good news.
Pepsi, for the Pepsi Center part of it.
That's good news, yes. All right. Any other questions regarding that announcement from Dr. Tucker? All right, Dr. Tucker, what else?
The third thing, the board has charged me to work lock and step in my cabinet with the board as we began to update policies, board policies along with superintendent policies. And we had our retreat on August 14th, and our outstanding legal counsel here led us through this exercise, looking at superintendent's policies under Section A, B, and E, and we spent almost 2+ hours looking at those policies, providing feedback. We did have those policies in advance, and so we came prepared to give feedback. And speaking of business partners, Charles Schwab allowed us, we're building that partnership, allowed us to use their facilities for the day free of charge. And so they're opening their arms up to us. So if you know anyone who works for Charles Schwab, tell them thank you.
Very good.
Thank you. And so we went over those policies, and I'll turn to Mary or any cabinet members if they would like to make any comments about our time looking at policies. Mary?
The only comments I'd add to Dr. Tucker's comments is that the cabinet is looking very closely at reviewing each of the proposed CASB superintendent files consistent with the board's recommendation in adopting their policies, along with also considering what input needs to be received from appropriate interested persons who are leaders, or if it's a personnel policy, where it needs to go to get appropriate vetting before a final adoption by the superintendent after the cabinet's recommendation.
Just to add clarity for those that are live streaming or in our audience, so we really have two sets of policies. One are board policies that are under our authority in terms of approval, revising, updating, adding, and there's policies that we've delegated to the superintendent that are more operational in nature around evaluation of personnel, instruction, and so this process has really been very revealing for us to say that we know there's some policies that we need to make sure we continue to oversee, but there's a lot of policies that were being supposedly overseen by this board that shouldn't have been, because we put that trust and delegation in use. So that's the work that's being done. Pleased to hear that the cabinet is on board with this as well. And I kind of laid the gauntlet down saying, hey, we're ahead of you guys. And so look like competition works. Kind of. So we're pleased to hear that you guys are working hard to, as well as to help clean this up so that we can really have clear direction of how we run this organization. So thank you. Dr. Tucker?
Yes, now we may pull slightly ahead of the board because every Wednesday from 1 to 4 and sometimes from 1 to 5:30 or maybe 6, correct, Ted, we have we have our cabinet meeting. And so a new standing item on that cabinet agenda would be to look at our policies, to update those. And so we will give, we'll take a look at those policies, update them, give those our comments to Ms. Taylor, and they will be available to the board.
Very good. Okay. Good to hear. Anything else, Dr. Tucker?
Yes, and I want to be very sensitive in saying this, because again, this is not any reaction to what has been said. you know, when I talked about the strategic plan, we have a very giving community, but we also have a very caring community, and it starts here with this board, and it starts with our teachers, support staff, and all of our colleagues, and we want to make sure we do everything right, and we work hard each and every day to do what's right and to do what's in the best interest of our students. And I want to, you know, thank our community for that. And as a superintendent in my seat, we're just compelled to want to make sure that we care for our folks, but we get accurate information out. And so it's important that our community know, our folks who are here and the folks who are live streaming, that parents can come and administer medicinal marijuana to kids. And we've heard, and I've spent a whole lot of time on this, and I will spend as much time as needed to understand this. So parents and caregivers can come and provide THC. Now, I've studied more about this stuff than I ever thought I would. I certainly didn't study it in superintendent school. I do it because we care about our kids. Eagle County is often mentioned as the only school district. There are 178 school districts in the great state here of Colorado. Eagle County is the only one that allows staff to sign a waiver of responsibility from the school district to administer cannabis. It's CBD. CBD has 0.3% of this of THC, the part that gives you a high. That waiver, that policy in Eagle County does not include THC. The issue here is whether or not Douglas County School District or the other school districts in the state should allow staff members, folks other than parents, without the supervision of nurses, to administer THC. Big difference between CBD and THC.
Thank you, Dr. Tucker. Next on our agenda is to move into our study work session. First item under that is our parent engagement update. Mr. Knight, is this your agenda item or someone else presenting today for us? The parent engagement update? Stacy Rader, Matt Reynolds, and tonight we'll be presenting the update on our parent engagement work.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm going to get us kicked off. I'm going to talk high level about parent engagement, what we've been working on over the summer primarily. Then Matt and Ted will jump in to talk more specifically about SAC resources as well as our parent complaint process. So over the summer, one thing we did add to our website under parents is a parent resource center, a landing page where some frequently asked questions can be found in terms of answers. We've also updated the parents guide to DCSD, which hasn't been updated in quite some time, and that's available on that landing page. This idea came in part from discussions with the DAC back in January. We did some table topic discussions where we asked DAC members if they could choose a top 5 or so resources for parents and also for SACs, what would they be? And we took a lot of that information to create this landing page, which will continue to be a work in progress. I don't know if I can show it. Let me see. Up. Probably not, because we weren't planning on it. But the link is there if you want to take a look at that. And then I worked alongside Matt Reynolds in July to hold a new member training for our District Accountability Committee, same as we did the year prior. This training was facilitated by Darcy Hutchins. She's the Director of Family Partnerships at the Colorado Department of Education, and her cohort, Lisa Steffen, And we provided both the high level, what is the purpose of a DAC from the state perspective, and then more specific about what the expectations are and roles of the DAC are here in Douglas County School District. See, and I knew I'd break it. There we go. Okay. We have also launched the application, and I use the word application loosely, for the Leaders for Douglas County Schools cohort that we talked about many months ago. We are looking at this as an inaugural year to see what type of interest we have. We launched the application last week specifically to our current SAC members, so that those who are already involved on the SACs of their schools have first dibs, if you will, to get into this cohort and learn even more and get even more involved. This week, here in the next 2 days, we're going to be launching that to a wider net. This cohort is really meant to help anybody who wants to truly dig in and understand Douglas County School District the opportunity to do so. It's a 9-month cohort. Each month has a different 3-hour class with a different focus. So we'll go from DCSD 101 to safety and security, to assessments and student data, and on and on. So it will be very in-depth. The idea with this being the first inaugural year is that it will be a first come, first serve basis. So versus application, it's really registration. And that's going to be limited to 30 participants for this first year. We also partnered with Skyridge Medical Center once again to relaunch Parent University. So we are moving forward. We have our first class scheduled for, and I believe it's September 24th, talking about the risks of vaping. And then we'll move on to other topics ranging from mental health to being an ambassador for your student and so on. So we're really looking forward to that, and we're getting great response already just to our first class that's been registration has been launched. And then we also partnered with Skyridge to further promote DCSD's mobile app. DCSD did launch a mobile app about a year ago, and now we're really getting that out to the public and making sure that they know about it. The app it works best with schools that are using School Messenger for their website. So a little close to half of our schools are doing that right now, and we're encouraging our other schools to come on board. All of the schools are listed in the directory, but more of that live news feed information works better for the schools that are using the School Messenger website. But the great thing about the app, no matter who's using it, is that district information is there, as well as alerts, especially school alerts, snow closures, any other kind of message that needs to be pushed out can be pushed to folks via push notifications. And with that, I'll turn it over to Matt.
Good evening. Thank you for letting me talk about SAC tonight. So we've done a few things since the last time we convened on this very subject regarding school accountability committees. One of the things that we wanted to do is, an ask was, let's provide more information. And we started with the DAC, the District Accountability Committee. And as Stacy said, we brought it to them to say, what are some resources that you would find helpful for school accountability committees, because they're a link to our school accountability committees. So they gave us some suggestions. And one of those was to clean up our website to make it more user-friendly. So that was one of our things to do, was let's go through and let's redesign the website. Let's clean off some of the old resources and update it with resources that are current, that are active, and there are things that are more related to what's actually happening. So we've done that, and it's linked there. Stacy was the first one to give that a trial run, so I know it doesn't quite work on the PowerPoint, but it does on the full address. We also provided some training videos. The ask there was, with training SACs, it can't be one event. In years past, we'd relied on the forum to provide that introduction training and in-depth training for our SAC members, but not all people can attend that. So our idea was to provide multiple modalities to provide training. And so one of them was just an on-demand video. They can go to the website, they can click on it, they can listen and hear about School Accountability Committee in general. And then we provided some very specific subjects based on the recommendations from our District Accountability Committee. So we have those there. The one that's forthcoming will be budget, and that'll be timely in terms of getting that out in September so that when they start working on that later on in the fall. We've also updated the handbook. The handbook, as it was constituted before, had information in there that was outdated, so we wanted to update that. So that was one of the things that we did as well. Training. Training was the other aspect that we wanted to kick off, and specifically we wanted to target our leaders. We have a variety of different trainings that we have in mind, and we actually did our first one last week at the district leadership team meeting, is to provide an overview of SACs, really, for district leaders, and have them dive into the bylaws and really connect with one another as building leaders to share ideas, and that'll be a recurring theme with our training. We will have further trainings at future DLT meetings. We've got unified improvement and budget will be two of the things that we do cover. And really, we want to start having a global conversation about parent engagement, customer service. That's really going to be something else that we want to talk about in addition to just SAC, which I think is something that we've looked forward to be proactive in how to engage with your SAC or your school community in a positive manner. We'll also have a survey in the spring. So we're being proactive with the training aspect of it, but we also want to survey the SACs in the spring to find out what have they done this year in terms of responsibilities, what are some of the things that they didn't touch on this year, and what are some additional supports that we can provide. We're also going to explore some additional ways to monitor the process for our SACs and to reach out to find out from our DAC members and other SAC members, what can we do to support this process, and where are there gaps in our support so that we can make sure that we give them the information that they need to proactively work with their school. We also are going to have some regional trainings. The dates are up there, which are open to our SAC members district-wide. They don't necessarily need to go to the one in their region, but we wanted to provide some areas that were close to them if they could make it. Again, the idea here is to provide an overview for SACs, give them an opportunity to connect with other SAC members and also their building leaders. A welcome letter and welcome email is something that was sent out, I believe, on Friday, just providing our SACs with some information based on the contact information that we have. We've asked schools to update their contact information for SACs so we can continue to provide that, not only through our District Accountability Committee, but also we can provide communication to them as well. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Ted to talk about the complaint process.
Good evening, directors. Over the years, we've received feedback from a handful of community members that they would like to see our school leadership parent complaint process more formalized, mainly around documentation and an ability to get a resolution in writing. So we launched a work group over the summer to start working with staff on how we could take our informal complaint process and make that a little more formal. We're hoping to launch that in October, so we're still in the early phases. We have to train school leaders, we have to develop a communication plan out to parents, and then we've got to update our parent guide and get that out to our community. The specific aspects that this group has come forward with at this point would be starting with an informal conference at the school level. There's a lot of conversation about whether or not the first level of a complaint process should be documented. If a parent calls and says, I want to talk to the principal, should they be directed to fill out a form? And might that be a little too formal, and might that be frustrating for parents that their very first opportunity to talk to someone at a school that they might feel blocked? Nope, you've got to stop, you've got to fill out this form, and only after you do that will we talk to you. Felt that might be a little impersonal. So we still wanted to start with an informal conference at the school level. As our current policy states, we want conflicts to begin at the level where they began. Step two, if that informal conference does not work, that's when we would become a little more formal. The parent would have a complaint form that they are to fill out. That would go to the director of schools, along with any other department that might have a part in this. So if it's an athletic complaint, it would go to the director of schools as well as the athletic director. There's timelines in there so parents know exactly when they can expect a response, and there's protocols for how that investigation goes. And then a written response goes back to the parent. If that answer is still not satisfactory, we do the same thing, except at my level. The parent will fill out this form, will come to me, I'll have 10 days to investigate, get a written response back, And then finally, level 4 would be that same process with the superintendent of schools. Again, each level submitted in writing, conference within 10 business days will result in a written response. These are for parent complaints for general conflicts that may happen in a school. If at any point during this process, there's an assumption of maybe a Title IX violation or a FAPE violation or something where we have other board policy, that conflict process would take over. So this is mainly for those general complaints. These steps were arrived, again, by a collaborative group of staff members based on feedback that they've received from community over the years. We did run this by a community member who's given us some feedback along the way, someone who's very passionate about this subject. Like I said, we're at a point now where we've kind of got a rough draft and are ready to take feedback before we roll this out towards the end of first quarter. And all three of us are now available to take any questions that you may have.
All right, very good, thank you. The three amigos for the update on parent engagement. It's really definitely exciting to see how we are really actively pursuing parents and giving them many different pathways. I know I have some questions, but I'm going to defer to other directors. Questions about the presentation. Director Lemieux.
Surprise. Honestly, I agree. Amazing work. I just have just a few little questions. The first one is for Ms. Rader. On your parent guide, looks awesome. I was actually able to look at all the links that you had in the presentation, except for the parent guide. So I would love if you could to send me that link. I don't know if my colleagues would like that, but I'd love to see that parent guide. But are hard copies available at all of our schools of that parent guide as well? I know some old school parents like me love the hard copy stuff. Are we providing hard copies to parents as well, or is it just electronic at this point?
My goal is to do print. I wanted to wait till that complaint process was finalized so we're not doing it twice just to save some money. I would also love to do it in English and Spanish, so doing some of that. Yeah,
Awesome.
So that's the plan.
Love that. Thank you very much. Mr. Reynolds, thank you. I have no questions for you. Great job. I'll let our DAC folks ask questions about that. But honestly, I cannot tell you how much I appreciate those videos. They were great. And then, of course, Mr. Knight, if you could, on the documentation, is there any documentation of the informal step 1? It's a little concerning that that might just be a conversation. Are we expecting any type of maybe signed, yep, I talked and everything's fine? What are we doing any documentation at step 1?
At this point, we're open to feedback, so I think we could, whether it's a note in Infinite Campus or just some documentation so that we can keep track of themes. I think we could pull our building leaders together and see what makes sense at that level.
And I know at one point we had a call-in system that automatically documented everything. Do we still use that system, or is that something that
Not familiar with that.
A while back? Okay, that was okay. And then on steps 2 through 4, I did see that there is documentation. Are we going to have a form that is consistent throughout every single one of our schools?
Yes, so it's one consistent form, and the committee created it based off some exemplars that are out there in other districts that they're using that asks a lot of pertinent information. Again, trying to not be too onerous for parents. We don't need them to take a half an hour to fill it out, but the ability for them to give us all the information that we need to do a thorough and full investigation, and then again, similar form for a response back.
Fabulous. And then my final question is, I'm hearing parents, administration, nothing from the student. And I'm assuming if there's a complaint, it's because there's a problem with a student. How are we getting voice from the students in this documentation?
So a lot of times that happens through that conference with the parents. Quite often we'll bring that student in. There are times when a parent wants to have that conversation without the student, and we respect that. And then there's other times where the parent wants to bring the student in. So that would probably happen during that actual sit-down conference that would happen within 10 days.
So is there any way we could include a parent did not want to, or
I think it'd be important to document that we did try to reach out to the student to help. We've been talking about restorative practices and things like that. And so I think it'd be really important if we can make sure we're getting student voice, and if the parent doesn't want their child part of that conversation, that we document that as well. So if as you're looking over these documents, if you could just make sure that we're getting feedback from the students, or if the parent is refusing to have the student be part of the conversation, we have documentation of that as well.
That's a great idea. I think we can add that.
Fabulous, thank you.
I'll just insert that I know I've had conversation, well, Director Lung and I had conversation with our leadership of Student Advisory Group about how to have a parallel system for students in terms of a complaint process. And really want to rely on them to come up with a similar system that says, what does level 1 look like for you? You know, who do you trust to be able to really sit down and share, you know, what it is that you're feeling that hasn't been heard? And so I agree with Director Lemieux. I think we definitely want to incorporate that in, but I also want to use our Student Advisory Group because I think they're excited about that as well, and really helping us understand what kind of steps they go through to deal with that process as well. So I think work to be done, I think. I'm going to, is there other questions about the parent complaint or this complaint process? Because I have a few of my own. I don't want to move off of it until we've addressed all those. So Director Chancha-Shore and then Director Holtzman.
I'd just like to comment a little bit about the informal conference, not necessarily always having a paper trail. Just knowing that you might have 10 informal conversations a day or more with parents, and that paperwork just ties a principal down to assure that they're getting something recorded. And lots of times it really is just managed in a one-on-one conversation. So I'd like to advocate that that stay pretty informal unless principals think otherwise.
My response, having been a former principal like Chancha-Shore, is I think principals always do keep some kind of way of documenting a concern when they deal with a parent, but it may be helpful for our principals to have a log or a consistent log so that they're actually filling that out with the parent. So as opposed to giving it to the parent and saying, hey, you fill this out before you can talk to me, I as principal am following up after our conversation, just documenting that so that there's consistency before it goes to the next level. I think that's what we're wanting, and I applaud the efforts so far, and that's a systemic way that's consistent across the board, because I think that's what we heard from parents, is that's not always clear. So, other questions from Chancha-Shore, then Director Holtzman?
So I can go ahead with the parent complaint process, and then I have one for kind of all of you at the end. But I appreciate that you guys are being thoughtful about not necessarily making parents fill out paperwork to just go have a conversation with their principal or the teacher. I'm wondering if at the high school level especially, if there's anything built into the process to actually encourage the participation of the student, to develop advocacy skills in these young adults. I guess in my mind, that's an obligation that we also have, that for me, at the high school level, I think a student should be involved. Obviously, if they would like their parent there with them to help with that, I think that's appropriate, but I guess I'm looking to the experts to see if you think that that's accurate, to see if you have put anything into the process to encourage that at the high school level.
I think that's great feedback, and the committee would agree with you. As students grow in age, we want to see them advocate, and I think we could make that part of the process, that's our suggestion. And of course, if a parent disagrees with that, we would honor that, but at least we could state that that was our hope.
Yeah, I appreciate that, because I think it's important for us to help them develop those advocacy skills as they become adults. So, and then also in regards to the parent and complaint process, I agree with my colleagues. Like, while I understand not having parents fill out documentation at that first level, if there was just something, nothing that's going to take a lot of time, understanding that principals have talked to a lot of people all day long, but just some sort of small documentation to say, I talked to this person on this date, this was
this was the result of that. I think it would be helpful, and I'm assuming that in this entire process, and I guess this is a question, that there's timelines, that you all have gotten feedback from building principals or whatever level to see what that timeline looks like.
Correct. Once you get to the formal aspect of that, it's 10 business days. So from the time you fill out that complaint form, you will be scheduled a conference with the director, myself, Superintendent Tucker within 10 business days.
And just a clarification on that last slide, superintendent's decision is final. Very accurate. We also have that policy right now, policy KE, that would allow a parent who is not satisfied with the superintendent's resolution to then appeal to the board. I'm assuming that would stay in place. I know I looked at, because I just wondered, I looked at surrounding districts, Cherry Creek, Littleton, Jefferson County, Denver, all have similar policies to our current policy, which does allow a parent to have that final step be the Board of Education. I'm assuming you're planning on that staying that way?
Yeah, I think that's probably where that appeal language comes in. Like, this is our internal process, and we'd move up through there. I would assume that appeal would stay in effect. I guess I would say that appeal didn't seem to fit in our language. This was our internal. If you still have concerns after our internal process, an appeal would be a step there.
I understand that. I just wanted to clarify for the public that might be watching. And before I ask my final question, I really do want to thank you all. I can remember a work session that we all came in on, I can't remember what day of the week, and we spent a lot of time with several parents and talked about progress that they would like to see and that we'd like to see, and this is really great work, and I really appreciate it. And my final question, and Ms. Rader kind of already addressed this, when I look at this and I think about the schools that I visit and the growing English language learning population and families that speak all different kinds of languages, and I think that that demographic is only increasing in our district. I was happy to hear that you're thinking about that Spanish translation for the parent guide. What else, just for the people who are listening, what do we have translators available? What else do we have for families who might need help with communication? What do we have for them?
So short answer, it's a work in progress. It's a little tough from a staffing perspective. I've talked to some of our neighboring districts and they have multiple translators on staff. We do use an outside organization to help us with translation. So if we have a larger publication, for example, we can contract to get that out. We have been working to get all of our SRP, so our standard response protocol messagings, lockouts, lockdowns, that type of thing. That messaging goes out in English and Spanish as well. And we've been working to get some of the shorter messages that we send out, a superintendent update, also out in those dual languages. It's been a little tougher with some of our longer emails, for example, so I don't have across the board there yet. But those are on the radar, trying to find an efficient, quick way to get that done and accurately. So I don't have a perfect answer yet, other than we're definitely looking at that and how we can get that happening in all avenues.
So if I were a teacher or a principal at one of our schools, it sounds like something you all might be looking to the board to support would be the addition of some translators, or is there someone that they could reach out to if they have a parent that comes to their conference?
Yeah, we have district translation services through the district, so if I was a parent who didn't speak English and I was coming in for, say, an IEP meeting or something, we do contract out with translators.
I want to come back to the question that Director Holtzman raised around superintendent level 3 decision is final. And I respect, Ted, what you've said in terms of this is the internal process. I think as we heard a speaker tonight address this, it makes it feel like, I think, from a person that doesn't understand the board's role, it makes that person feel like that there's no other way to appeal a decision when the superintendent's given a written response to the concern. And so I think we need to be careful with our language. I don't know that I would advocate that we have to spell out, the policies the board has necessarily, but I think there needs to be some kind of indicator that there still continues to be a process beyond the superintendent. And I don't know how the board directors feel, but I'm a little uncomfortable with the word final. I just think that, and we've already seen issues where that's not the case, because as elected officials, we have to allow our stakeholders to have hearings, to have public comments, to be able to address us. So I want to tease that out a little bit, and I'd like to kind of hear from other directors about that, but I'm a little bit uncomfortable with the word final. So just would entertain any other conversation about that. If I'm the only one, I will back off. But it just seems to me like it kind of puts a exclamation mark on it that I'm not sure we want to put on. Any other comments, Director Chancho Shore?
I mean, maybe just adding internal process final, so that clarifies that there's a appeal process.
That would be comfortable with me, Director Vogel?
Or even if we say the district staff, because will a regular person know what internal means versus the board?
Yeah. Director Holtzman?
And that's why I brought it up, just to be clear with folks. And we might even just look to policy KE for some language that we already have, that if a person, after the superintendent's decision, it doesn't feel that that's satisfactory, they can be advised to consult and request a hearing before the board. Maybe just add that on there.
We obviously have some work to do as well, because we know that our KE policy is coming up here in the next couple months for us to revise. And so respect kind of the limbo we're in terms of not wanting to publish things, especially when we're anticipating some additional updates. But yeah, I would agree. I think if we can show that there's some continued steps and that this is district staff's way to resolve a complaint, I think that would make me feel more comfortable as well. Any other comments about the complaint process, Dr. Tucker?
Just briefly, we talked about this as a cabinet, especially with Ted, Mary, Stacy, and Matt, and we said that this is internal. We can certainly add some additional language, but when it comes to discipline, and obviously Christine and David both know this, being former building principals, when it comes to issues of discipline along the lines of suspension, expulsion, what have you, we do advise, especially in a suspension or expulsion hearing, we do advise parents and students, more importantly students, about their rights, their due process rights, that they can appeal to the board, and then if they're still not happy with the board's decision, they can then appeal to a court of law. So it's understood, and our principals, assistant principals, and our deans of students are quite aware of this, and I feel very confident in saying that they do advise the students of the due process.
Director Chancho Shore?
It's in the paperwork, in the handouts that the kids get when it gets to that.
It is in there.
Other comments or questions regarding the complaint process? Other questions about the other engagement areas that we've heard tonight? Director Vogel?
I had a question about this SAC stuff. We heard in a public comment earlier talking about elections of SAC members. Is all of our stuff that we have, our policy, our bylaws, they're all aligned, that it's very clear the expectation is that SAC members are to be elected by the population of the school and not chosen by leaders?
Yeah, and it's spelled out in the bylaws, which are currently approved. Those bylaws may come under review. As you recall, the DAC bylaws have been reviewed. And so we may take a visit on the SAC bylaws as they're currently constituted, but it spells out what elections and how they occur.
If I could just follow up with that, along those lines, statute really defines what DAC and a lot of the role of our SACs. We don't have separate board policy that would supersede statute. I just want to clarify that. We pretty much, and if it's in statute, we don't choose to replicate statute in our board policy. So I just also want to just say that there's not an issue of board policy versus bylaws. We don't have anything that would supersede SAC bylaws.
Yeah.
Director Lung.
I have a question related to the SAC. A decade ago, the DAC was in charge of make sure that the SAC is in compliance in terms of their membership requirement. And I believe around 2011, 2012, that was gone. So with these new revisions that you have, who's in charge of make sure that the SAC stay compliant with the state law in terms of their membership selections?
Well, there's multiple components to that. I'm certainly a component in that conversation. I'm a resource for accountability committees, as well as principals. I rely on the directors of schools to help out with that as well, to ensure that our SACs are functioning according to the bylaws.
Other questions? Director Lung?
So are you going to publish a report yearly to shows, or at least to superintendents or to the board, and show us the compliance of each district school? That report used to given out, before yet, and I have never seen one in 5 or 6, 7 years. So will something like that be compiled by you?
I certainly can explore that. I've never seen a report in the past, and perhaps I should do some research and see what that report looked like in the past.
Well, in the 2006, when they passed the bond and mill levy elections, there is a certain amount of money per student. I remember correctly, it's around $70 per student that was allocated for, I believe it's IT or well language stuff. So if the school is not in compliance with the SAC, the district can choose to withhold that money per student to that particular school. And that's why at that time, we were checking for compliance, just to give out those money. And I think it's important to bring back a report to the board so the board can have some ideas. What is the compliance issues of the SAC in terms of it comply with the state law? Now I know that we have no money, the carrot to make sure that they're in compliance, but I think make sure that parent engagement is an important for this district. I'm sure there's a highest priority for many of us. I myself, as a parent engagement or liaisons, this is one of the highest priority to make sure that our parents don't feel they are not being treasured and their voice is not being heard. And I think make sure that the SAC is in compliance in terms of the elections and the officer and they are duly elected according to the state law. I myself look at that as very, very important to make sure that the parents feel empowered again. So I myself would love to see a report like that yearly.
And I know Mr. Smith, CFO, had some comments about the financial question you raised.
Director Lung, your recollection is correct. There was a $60 per student allocation on the SBB. And what we had seen happen is that was completely discretionary money, and it was just rolled into the overall budget, and it added, quite frankly, more confusion to principals about what that extra allocation was. So to be clear, we did not take it away, but we rolled it into the overall per pupil amount that they get, because our expectation from a finance office is that the SAC is involved in the entire budgeting process of the school, that their input is provided, not just on the $60 per student. And Mr. Reynolds has it in here, but we are building a PowerPoint or kind of a video for SACs about budget and how they should be involved and how they can interact with their school principal as they develop priorities for their school budget. So your recollection is spot on, but our practice has changed slightly over the past few years, primarily just due to making it simpler for our principals to understand, but also making sure that our SACs are involved in the entire budget process, not just that one allocation.
All right, very good. Well, again, to the three of you, thank you. Mr. Knight, I think the only loose end I see is if we could get a follow-up regarding the complaint policy. I think we'd all enjoy seeing some of the forms and just, some of that more defined as well, so that we understand what a parent goes through or is intended to go through. before there's possibly an appeal to the board. So that'll be our next step. And last comment, Director Lung?
Well, again, I want to thank you very much for all three of your works because, I mean, throughout the summer, I know how hard the three of you are working together on this. And I want to thank from the bottom of my heart that, you know, you three are spending a lot of time on this. And one thing I do want to follow up is that yearly compliance report for the SAC, because I want to make sure we know how many of them complied, even though we don't have the carrots of $60 anymore. But I think it's still important to shows the parents and committee member that we care.
Very good. All right, very good. Again, thank you, the three of you. The board's going to take about a 5-minute break, and then we'll reconvene at 5 till 8. Okay, we're going to go ahead and reconvene. We will reconvene our meeting at this time. Next on our agenda is an update regarding our strategic plan by Greenway Strategy. So Marlena Gross-Taylor, I assume you're going to come up with some introductions and take it away. For the public, Marlena Gross-Taylor is our Chief Academic Officer.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm very excited about tonight and the presentation that you're going to hear because what you're going to see is just months and months of hard work, good work, and just incredible collaboration by all of our teams at the district level, at the school level. This is most definitely not a project that I could have done alone or wanted to do alone. Even with Greenway Strategy Group helping us, and they have been instrumental and will continue to help us as we roll out our plan, it's just a great testimony to how we can all come together and how people can be heard and how our plan, I feel, truly reflects those voices. And what you'll see tonight are the objectives and strategic initiatives that will give us more detail and more focus on how we're going to proceed over the next 5 years. So without further ado, I would like to reintroduce you to Martha Greenway from Greenway Strategy Group, and she will give us our overview, and then we'll open up for questions.
Good evening, Ms. Greenway.
Good evening. It's lovely to be here again. And I'd again like to introduce my colleague, Erica Cooper, who is going to be joining me today and tomorrow. Then there's a third member of our team, Teresa Cho Bergeron, and we've been serving as coaches and facilitators for the district staff in this work, and will continue to do so during the next phase that I'll talk about this evening. So by way of just a reminder, I wanted to again review the approach that we're taking to the strategic planning process. So we have completed the analysis phase, and then through an extensive set of community input, we are now nearing the end of the strategy development phase. So this evening, I will be sharing with you the objectives and the strategic initiatives. We're not yet ready to share the measures, but I will say that for each of the objectives that you will see this evening, the teams that have worked on those have identified potential performance metrics that could be utilized to assess progress. And of course, we will be also working with the district data and assessment folks to identify performance metrics around the long-term outcomes in the strategic plan. So you'll essentially be measuring progress in this end phase in 3 different ways. You'll be measuring whether performance changes on the priority student outcomes that you've identified. You'll be assessing whether the objectives, the areas of district work that the objectives talk about transforming within each strategic theme, whether that work is actually improving. And then finally, you'll be able to assess whether or not the initiatives we're going to discuss tonight are actually happening as planned. So that's really progress reports on how the implementation of the plan is going. And all of that will be included in the monitoring and reporting process. So we are at the end of the strategy development phase and moving into the action planning phase. And just again, as a reminder, we understand the board is going to take a look at the district vision and mission and have an opportunity to review that in light of the components of the strategic plan that we'll be talking about tonight. The priority student outcomes are the specific measurable results that we want to achieve for our students. The strategic themes are the areas that must be addressed within district work in order to achieve those priority outcomes. The objectives really represent choices of all the different things we could do within these strategic themes. What have emerged as the areas that we really need to focus on in terms of our improvement? And the strategic initiatives are the significant projects to implement the objectives. In our next phase, we'll be working on the action plan. So I am just going to provide one caveat for our conversation tonight. When we look at these initiatives, it leads us to a lot of questions about who's going to do that, how are they going to do that, when are they going to do that, how much is it going to cost to do that? All of that will be thought through in this next step of action planning, so we're not prepared to talk about those levels of details. We really have some high-level ideas that we'll be sharing with you this evening. And so on a timeline, as I mentioned, the last time we reported to you, we were still discussing the priority student outcomes and strategic themes. And we had just received a great deal of stakeholder input, and we're proposing some revisions at that point. We've then moved forward, working with strategy teams that we have supported and coached to develop the objectives, draft measures, and strategic initiatives. Actually, the cabinet met last week and has made some recommendations also about the phasing of these, specifically which ones they see as launching first. And tomorrow, we will be training initiative action teams to develop the action plans. And that will occur over the next 2 months so that by the end of October, sufficient information will be available to prepare for putting these things in full action the next school year. So let me just remind the board and the community of the steps that we've taken to get to this point. So as I mentioned, there's been extensive analysis of student success, previous stakeholder input, including all the information you gathered during the superintendent search, the former surveys that the district had completed, and information on comparable districts. We held community input sessions to understand the stakeholders' perceptions of assets and improvement opportunities, and then we flipped that into a survey where we could actually get a better sense of priority on those items amongst community members. An internal design team reviewed all of that information, drafted the priority student outcomes and strategic themes. We brought those to the board and then had another round of stakeholder input sessions and received some very good feedback, a few tweaks to the strategic themes, but also information that informed the strategic initiatives that you're going to see this evening. We formed strategy teams around each strategic theme, and those teams did the work of drafting the objectives and the strategic initiatives. However, they did not do so without first, in July, posing very specific questions about each strategic theme that were then provided to district leaders, principals, and teacher leaders to respond to. So all of that input, in addition to the stakeholder input that was gathered in the April timeframe, was all part of what went into the objectives and strategic initiatives. So just as a reminder, these are the priority student outcomes and strategic themes that we're working within. I know you all have your board goals memorized, but I'm just going to read them because I think it's very apparent how this plan is really taking those board goals and putting them into daily implementation. So we have academic excellence, outstanding educators and staff, safe, positive culture, climate and culture, collaborative parent, family, and community relations, and financial well-being. And particularly in regard to collaborative parent, family, and community relations, I want to make the point that that is going to be executed throughout each of the strategic initiatives as the strategic initiatives are implemented. And when I go through the areas of the action plan that will be developed, you'll see that stakeholder engagement is a key component. So it's not something we just do once or we have as a separate area where now we go out and engage people, but it's inclusive in the entire implementation of the plan. And I want to just say a few words about the phase 1 initiatives and where those ideas emerged from. So as you'll see, there's a large number of initiatives in what we're going to share with you this evening. 10 of those have been identified as being in phase 1, meaning that action planning will begin on those immediately, and they would be prepared for full implementation in the 2020-21 school year. But I want to make very clear that because something is in phase 1, it does not indicate that it's the most important. These are all equally important, but there are simply some reasons why some things need to go before other things. And one of those reasons is in some cases, there's things that are already in flight, as I say. There's things that the district is already working on. There's progress being made, and we need to make sure that it gets incorporated into the strategic plan implementation. In other cases, there's a sense of urgency based on the stakeholder input and expectations and other opportunities that are happening in the district that we really want to take advantage and show that we're making progress in these areas first. And then finally, some areas simply have to get done before other initiatives can happen. So there's a natural sequencing to some of this. So those were all factors that were considered, in addition to the fact that we can't expect the same people to do too many things at one time. So as you'll see as we unfold this, there is one initiative that's already underway and the board has directed that is a really significant lift for the human resources staff. And so we don't want to deploy a lot of other things that are going to require their attention because that is really got to be a priority and that's going to be somewhat all-consuming in terms of new and additional work. So that's another thing we have to consider, as well as the impact on those in the schools that are going to have to implement things. We don't want to load too many things on our teachers or too many things on our building leaders. So I know that this is difficult to see. It is posted for the community, and it is the one that says final version 2. And so we have for each of our strategic themes between 1 and 3 objectives. And then within each of those, we have strategic initiatives, and the ones that are red are the ones that will be in phase 1. We have numbered them just to make it easier to talk about them. But again, they're not in any particular priority order. So within the area of health, safety, and social emotional supports for students, there's really 3 main areas that will be addressed: the physical and psychological safety and security, and then the mental health competency. And so that's, I'm kind of shorthanding this, but what we heard a lot from your stakeholders, which is not something we hear everywhere, is that the student well-being, fulfillment, the whole child focus is equally as important to academic achievement. And it's very important to your community. And so we have an objective that really calls that out. And then the third is regarding an inclusive culture that ensures all students feel safe and valued. So you can see that within these 3 objectives, there are 2 strategic initiatives that will launch first. The first one is to partner with city, county, state, and federal stakeholders on meeting new and ongoing identified safety enhancements. There's already a lot of work going on around this. There's obviously a high level of interest in your community in seeing this happen. So that will be one that would be in phase 1. And then also to ensure consistent implementation of the multi-tiered systems of support. But one of the things that this group wanted to make sure of is that we're not treating these various ways of responding to student needs as separate things, but that we really arm teachers to be able to implement these tools as a part of a toolbox that's dependent upon whatever a student needs. So you also see here the social emotional learning framework, the trauma-informed practices, and the restorative practices that would all be part of this initiative. And then the third initiative that would be implemented under this particular strategic theme is to increase and embed learning opportunities and experiences involving inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility. Under positive and supportive culture, there are 3 objectives: to define and implement a high-performing working environment for all employees, to enhance engagement of all employees through mutual respect and positive recognition, and then finally, to enhance opportunities for all employees to be ambassadors for the district. And let me say, as I go through the rest of these, that for those that are not in phase 1, I just want to make the kind of point that over the next few months, there may be some wording revisions to some of those, and in addition, there may be opportunities to merge some of those together. So right now we're sharing with them separately, but we do feel like some of these, as we think about them more, we might want to combine them. So just be aware that there might be some shifts and transitions to some of the wording, but the concepts will remain the same. So under positive and supportive school culture, defining and developing agreed upon core values, behaviors, and collective commitments has been identified as something that has to go first, because without that and real clarity around what it is we all believe in and what are we all committed to, the rest of it doesn't really have a place to land. So that needs to start first. However, the group also felt that it was important to really begin immediately to create systems to regularly celebrate individuals and teams in the district. And so to really have a spirit of celebration, high performance, and to make sure that that aligns with the core values, behaviors, and collective commitments that will be developed, but that really couldn't wait. So those will be the two areas that would emerge in phase one. Under post-graduation guidance and preparation, two objectives: to increase stakeholder awareness of all postgraduate opportunities. And so one thing that we found very interesting is, even though that clearly says post-graduation guidance and preparation, the word college is not in that statement. The feedback we got back from the stakeholders was, this isn't just about college. Make sure it's not just about college. So there's a very high interest in this community in ensuring students are aware of and prepared for multiple pathways, be that starting their own business, moving straight into some sort of a trade certification or licensure, or going to college. And so one of the things that the group identified as an issue is that there's not necessarily an awareness of all those opportunities, much less an awareness of how one pursues those. And so really ensuring that the district is communicating well and providing the array of opportunities. And then secondly, not just having the awareness, but then to also make sure that there's sustainable quality educational opportunities for all students. And sustainable was important there because many of these kinds of opportunities can be expensive. In some cases, they can serve only few students. So we really want to think about things that can be sustained and accessible over time. So the one initiative that they have decided to start with is the awareness. So to utilize a systemic and coordinated approach to ensure awareness of pathways leading to associate's and bachelor's degrees, industry credentials, and military service. That can be done without a lot of new resources, whereas some of the other ones might take a little longer trajectory, so they really wanted to go ahead and get started on that one. Aligned curriculum and flexible instructional delivery has two objectives: to create and implement an inclusive, equitable, and comprehensive PK through 12 curriculum, and to create district-wide aligned instructional frameworks to actually then teach that curriculum using effective practices. The curriculum implementation is, I think, critical to this, and something that this group clearly understands is that there is a balance that's sought among stakeholders between ensuring consistency in student outcomes and base understanding, so that I know that regardless of what school my child is in, they are going to have the ability to learn the same kind of core standards. However, the content that's used to teach that, the context that's used to teach that can vary because people still want the wealth of different instructional options that you have provided. And so this strategic initiative is to establish a district-level curriculum framework that includes aligned resources, but also includes flexibility around what those resources might be. And it's necessary to have the curriculum framework before then moving into the instructional framework. So that is the one that is identified for phase one. Equitable distribution of resources. So here again, the community was very clear that equitable does not mean everybody has exactly the same thing, and that we're creating cookie cutter mandates across all schools. And so this group identified essentially two objectives. One, to increase access to equitable opportunities for students by determining and implementing base programming expectations. So again, this is wherever you go, you can assume that these certain base requirements that we would all agree are critical to student success are in every school. And then from there, we can build up with flexibility. And then secondly, to create a personnel allocation distribution that includes a set of base expectations that increase equitable opportunities for our students at every school. So in other words, making sure we have base personnel allocations that match up with the base student opportunities we want every student to be able to access. So underneath this one, in terms of the equitable opportunities, the real opportunities to align the school boundary and enrollment analysis with the strategic plan is the thing that everybody agreed needed to be tackled first, because that might also inform the other things that are on this list in terms of initiatives. And then under the personnel allocation, the actual base staffing allocation and some of the examples that you see here, again, people are thinking, well, that may need to wait a little bit until we at least get this boundary issue and the enrollment analysis and how many students are going to be in each school settled. But we can go ahead and address 2B, which is to determine the best practice guidelines that guide additional pay. And I will say that another thought is that if we're going to do the next one, which is about the predictable compensation schedule, there has to be some rationality and common guidelines around additional pay, because those things really need to be considered in concert so that we're not using additional pay to then create inequities that we've fixed with the compensation system. So that one would be in phase one. And then the last one, recruitment, retention, and deployment of high-quality employees. This first strategic initiative, 1A, that's in phase one, was actually included both under Objective 1 and Objective 2, but we can really only show it one time, which is to increase retention rates in all employee categories, but also to enhance and expand recruitment. So clearly, the development and recommendation of a predictable compensation schedule that has all of those attributes and is comparable to surrounding districts will help you with both retention and recruitment, and that's the thing that needs to be first. And then the third objective here is to promote a culture of learning and development for all employees by providing opportunities and pathways for growth in your job, but also to provide career advancement and clear pathways for that for those who are interested in it. And there's a lot of work already happening in these areas, so that's going to kind of stay status as it is with a greater emphasis on that during a later stage of the strategic plan. So I'll stop for questions in a moment, but let me first just clarify what we're going to do next. So as I mentioned, we've formed initiative action teams for those in phase one, and tomorrow Eric and I will be leading a training with the people who will be the leaders of those teams. And the action plans that they will be developing include a clear definition of the current state and the desired state. In other words, here's where we are now, and here's what we want it to look like when we're finished. Ongoing stakeholder engagement, very specific action steps, responsibilities, and timelines. And as I mentioned, this will be reported to the board on a regular basis so that you can monitor the implementation. Budget for up to 3 years, staffing requirements, both in terms of impact on existing staff, but also any new positions that might be required, any assumptions, interdependencies on other things that might be happening in the district or elsewhere, and risks. There'll be further refinement and phasing of the remaining initiatives, and then also work on the communications, branding, messaging, and content. And I'd also like to mention that as part of our ongoing support for the implementation, we will be putting some specific resources on supporting the design of the compensation schedule and implementation as part of our overall support for the implementation of the action planning. So at that point, I will pause and see what questions you have.
Well, I'm just exhausted already. Holy cow. It's a lot of initiatives. I mean, but I really appreciate the sensitivity behind manpower that you started out with, to really say that we want to phase in so that we're not overtaxing our staff and doing it logically, because there's some things that are sequential. But I think I'm pleased to hear that there's that protective filter that says we can only take on so much. But at the same time, Ms. Greenway, thank you. Again, it's just fun to watch this thing just continue to get more and more microscopic in terms of the things that we're going to focus on. So definitely some exciting work. Board directors, what questions do you have about the presentation that we just heard? One of the things I'll just throw out there is I know that Director Lemieux gave me a glance when you mentioned mission and vision, that the board has some work to do there. But I'll tell you what, I'm kind of excited. I mean, I know I've done it in reverse as a principal. You know, you spend a lot of time wordsmithing your missions, and then all of a sudden everything trickles down. But I kind of like this concept of how it's trickling up, that I think we're going to have a much better idea about what our what is after this process is completed, because it's going to be really clear to us that our stakeholders are saying these are the things we value and these are the initiatives that we're going to take on. I think our work will be really easy at that point to say, yeah, this is the what now. This is exactly what we're going to be accountable for in terms of inspiring the system. So in some ways, I'm kind of glad we haven't defined a mission yet, because that mission's about 20-some hundred years old. And so I'm looking forward to doing some work there. But again, thank you. Questions, Director Holtzman, I think you had your hand up.
I just have a couple. First of all, thank you all. So impressed and pleased with the amount of input that you're getting from our building leaders, our teachers, our community, parents, students. I mean, it's really incredible. And the way you're pulling it all together, I just really appreciate it. And I think you actually answered one of my questions, but just kind of for our community, when I look at health, safety, and social emotional supports, the phase 1 in red that's identified as considerations for addressing city, county, state, and federal partnerships. And I think you answered it because to me, that's something we've already been doing quite a lot of. So I'm guessing that that's something that makes sense to continue right now. But prior to hearing that, I was just wondering why the next one, which I think I have some notes I can't quite read up there, getting input from students, staff, and parents wasn't in phase 1. Because I know that's something that we're really interested in, especially, hearing from our students and our staff about those things. Not to say that we can't do that while we're focusing on phase 1, but just if you could kind of talk to me about that one, that'd be great.
I think the thinking on the 1B is to actually take what's developed in 1A and then ensure that students, parents, and staff understand those practices and what their responsibilities are in implementing those practices. And so that was the thought with 1A, let's make sure we've identified all the safety enhancements. We know what everybody's role is, what everybody needs to do, what's going to happen in terms of the partnership with our external agencies that support safety, and then roll into the more detailed safety procedures. But that ongoing work of kind of listening to students and parents and engaging them in the conversation about what's happening in the schools, that's not going to stop. Did I address that correctly? Yeah.
And totally makes sense because you also said that the basically student, parent, community collaboration is inclusive throughout the plan. So that makes sense to me too. And then finally, just at the end, you were mentioning devoting some resources, and I'm assuming that means Greenway strategies resources to assist with our compensation structure. And I mean, I think that's great because that's one of the very important things our board has asked to happen this year. So if you could just kind of talk to us a little bit more about that. I'm assuming you'll be working with the consultant and with HR.
Right. So really what we're going to do is just add an extra lens of project management to the work that's happening. And sort of there's these broad milestones of what needs to be accomplished in order to be ready for the board presentation, and breaking those down a little bit more finitely into steps of what exactly needs to occur. We will also be supporting the teacher input sessions that are going to happen in October. We'll be training the facilitators as we train the facilitators for the community input for this. And we will also be, as we did for the strategic plan, directly receiving the input that the teachers provide, and then our staff will code that and categorize that. Additionally, we are going to just kind of assist in looking beyond the existing region for other step and lane salary structures that might be possible alternatives. So taking a more national perspective to see if there's anything else out there that perhaps should be considered. So those are the three main things we're doing, kind of helping with the overall project management, taking a national look, and then assisting in gathering that teacher input and doing the analysis of that.
One final statement. I'm really excited about this. I'm excited about how all of our staff, from the superintendent, to everyone, is involved in this, and I'm really excited about it. So thank you all.
If we could flip back to slide 5, and then I see a couple other hands down the dais. You mentioned these strategy teams that worked over the summer to develop the initiatives. How did those get developed? And I guess my other part of my question is how were they represented in terms of with teachers and other voices? If you could just help me understand that process.
I'll let Marlena explain exactly how the teams were formed. I will say that it is our recommendation that we not try to put teachers on these teams. And the reason being twofold. One is, given the intensity of the work, particularly in your case, the time it occurred, having teachers be a consistent presence generally doesn't happen very well. And even if it's during the school year, then we're pulling them out of class. And so then what ends up happening is that they show up only occasionally, and the work is very sequential. So they really don't have a contribution. The other reason is that a few teachers on each team does really not represent the full breadth and depth of teacher perspective. So instead, what we do is we have the teams go out to teachers and get a broader representative group of teachers to then provide feedback so that we know that we're getting it in an authentic way, we're getting it related to the right issues, not just the one meeting where a teacher who could come happened to show up, and we're hearing from a more representative group. And so that's the way that was managed in the process. So I'll let Marlena talk about how the teams were actually structured.
So one of the things we had to consider was that the strategy team work, again, was over the summer. And so when we look at who is available and then also the level of expertise, because while we certainly appreciate and want to make sure we have specific things to support our teachers, we also have to acknowledge the level of expertise of those here in our district office, whether they're directors, whether they're coordinators, and those kinds of things, because they're helping to lay the roadmap down for our teachers on a day-to-day basis. So our strategy teams consisted of a cabinet sponsor, so we were literally there as a sponsor. We weren't there as directing the work. And we really thought about with our leaders, who all do we need to have at this table, especially from our district office, right? Who do we need to have to make sure we have a very diverse set of voices at the table to create the strategy teams and to do the work? But I think what's really important, and Martha mentioned that earlier, if there was any team that needed to test an objective or a strategy or ask a question, they definitely had the ability to do so. And then to just close that circle at our leadership summit, which was at the end of July, we had for both days available specific questions around what the strategy teams had developed that everyone at the leadership summit could give feedback. And we had over 600 leaders there, and it wasn't just principals, but assistant principals, deans, building leadership teams, which do consist of teachers, and other teacher leader roles that were there. So you take all of that information combined with the exhaustive feedback sessions that we had, that every teacher was available to give feedback, we do feel that we had enough perspective and information to create what you see here.
Other than that leadership summit, was there another opportunity? Did the strategy team go, I know Martha mentioned the strategy team goes out and talks to a broader representation. Has that occurred with our strategy teams?
So if each team felt that they needed to do that, then they were definitely able to do that. What I do know is that when we presented our questions, particularly for those teacher leaders, the feedback that we received from that, if we needed to make adjustments to the objectives, and we did, then that was something that we were able to do. Absolutely. So as we developed the action plans, because as Martha said, it's very easy, and she has to remind me often not to go straight to the action plan to get these things done, then we can make sure that depending on what the action steps are for each initiative, especially since we're in the school year, we can visit teachers or visit principals or visit our student group and all of these different pieces as needed. That's why it's going to take around 2 months to develop the action plans, because we want them to be very thorough. And if those action plans need to last for more than just a year, then we have the information and the resources to do so. So the feedback from teachers, from community, from parents, that does not end. That's going to be embedded within the action plan to make sure that we are not missing the mark. And I just want to remind all of you here that, remember, this strategic plan is a living, breathing plan. If we have to make a pivot, if we feel like that is best to do because of feedback or because of implementation success or lack thereof, we will do that. So this is not something that once it's printed on the 20th when we have our launch, right, and we'll make it prettier than what you see here and just easier to consume, that doesn't mean like that's it and we can't change it.
One other point on this topic I just want to make is that during those April-May stakeholder input sessions, oops, I'm going the wrong direction. When this was tested, for each of these strategic themes, the breakout groups were asked, what ideas do you have for how the district can improve performance in this area? Those were recorded, they were coded, and each team got that input, and they got it coded in a way that told them, did this come from teachers? Did this come from parents? Did this come from district leaders? So I think we asked at the beginning, we did some work, we went out and tested again, and I understand the sort of the habit of making sure that teams have like one of everybody on them. But as I mentioned, our recommendation is rather than expecting that one teacher to show up once a week for 2 or 3 hours and represent all teachers, that this mechanism is really much more authentic.
Makes sense. And I would just say that there's a hypersensitivity on this dais about employee voice. And we said teachers, but I would say it goes beyond just teachers as well. And I will say we will continue to challenge that. Your rationale makes sense to me. That helps me understand. But I know that we're going to be relentless about the question of how do we know that as many voices in our district have had a chance to respond and influence and massage. And I love the idea that it's, you know, it's easily adaptable at any time. I mean, that's a hallelujah in itself. But I just want you to know that this board has a real sensitivity because of past circumstances, that the voice has to drive this of our employees, and it can't be a top-down kind of initiative. So thank you for that. Director Chanchashore and Director Lemieux, I know both of you had your hands up earlier. Director Chanchashore.
Wow, pretty cool to see all of this laid out in such a comprehensive way. Want to identify a couple things, and related to what I'm identifying is a question as well. So I can see alignment from having the special education task force over a year ago to strategic themes, and then in the strategic themes, some specific initiatives. So the specific initiatives that I can identify are in the first strategic theme, health, safety, and social emotional supports, with strategic initiative 2A. And then I can identify specifically strategic initiative 3A. And I know that that was language related to feedback from our special education task force. And as I'm going down to the equity strategic theme, equitable distribution of resources, and looking through those initiatives, I'm looking for additional themes related to special education practices. Can you help me find them?
I think they're embedded in all of that. And so it's always a problem when you start providing examples, because then you're not exhaustive. But I think the intent under Objective 1 and Objective 2 is to consider equitable opportunities for all students. And this was actually discussed in the cabinet review of this, that we need to keep in mind when we say all students, we really do mean all students. And so if there are certain base things that our students with special needs require, we can't have those be options across schools, and that is definitely part of the thinking here.
So they're not identified, and understand that there are many things identified in phase 1 that are already a heavy lift. But what is the timeline then for strategic initiatives under equitable distribution 1A and 1B that are specifically related?
I think the answer to that is to stay tuned. The cabinet needs to discuss the phasing of those others. And I think that the intent with those is to ensure that, I'll just put it this way, that the analytical work has time to be done properly, but also that the cultural work has time to be done properly, so that this is not erroneously perceived as a one-size-fits-all mandate, because if that's the perception, we can tell you from our stakeholder input, it will be rejected. So this is a complex area to move into. And I'll also just say, as a district, if you're on the continuum of, hold tight or let loose, you all are definitely on the let loose end of the continuum. And so in terms of local control and decision-making, right? And so in terms of, do we have a lot of mandates from the top and dictates about how we do things, or do we have a lot of local school control? So you're definitely on the local school control side of the continuum. And so trying to pull that lever back this way a little bit is not something that should be done without serious consideration. And so that is really the thinking behind those needing to take a little bit more time and careful thought.
Let me add one thing to that too. So I believe I might have mentioned this before when Martha was here last. There are some things that we know that we have to address now. And so to your question specifically in resources, and I mentioned this with curriculum, we know that there are some things that we have to address right now. So whereas what I think you're looking for will be laid out very specifically in an action plan, a very exhaustive action plan around each of these initiatives, we also know that there are some things that we have to do now. Scott knows it because I reach out to him often about, just additional things that we did not account for, that I could not account for when I started in November because I didn't have a grasp and feedback on what those hot items were, whether that's resources for SPED, whether that is phonics instruction, whether that's those core curriculum pieces, so all of our teachers can have that base level of materials and that all of our students are guaranteed a viable curriculum. So there are some things that we're doing now. It's just that when we phase in each of these themes throughout the next 2 years or 3 years, we're going to have even more intentionality around it. So it doesn't mean we're not providing resources and training and professional development for all groups, not just SPED, but our GT, our EL, our gen ed teachers, our inclusion teachers, our classified staff that support these classrooms and these students. But we will wait for more specifics in the action plan for that. But just do know we are working and putting some things in place now because we have to.
Well, just do know I'm always looking. But with regard to timeline, phase one timeline is?
2021.
Okay. And then is this a 3 to 5?
It is a 5-year plan, but our initiatives we want to roll out in the first 3 years if possible. Now, we do have to consider budgets because all of those things I listed, they are not free.
Thank you.
Curriculum U.
So it's probably a good thing I'm going last because I was a little emotional watching this. This has been a lot of years working, and I'm watching the presentations of what we're doing with parent engagement and SACs and professional development and this strategic plan, and I am overwhelmed at the work that our cabinet has done, our staff has done, our teachers, our certified, our bus drivers are. This is truly overwhelming what's happened in just 2 short years. And so for that, I just want to say thank you. And I'm sorry I don't know you well enough to cry in front of you, but I'm going to do it anyway, right? I learned it from Wendy. But I just want to say thank you so much. This is incredibly comprehensive. And I also appreciate your honesty in saying our pendulum is way over here, and it's time for us to start trusting that the work that happens in the Wilcox building and in the budget building is extremely important to trust those experts just as much as we trust our teachers and our school staffs in the classroom. And just as important as that collaboration that we have with our parents, none of this happens in a vacuum. We've been in a vacuum long enough, and I just want to say thank you for saying we're at that point where now we've done the work, we've done the surveys, we're going to continue that work in surveys, we've learned from our past, and we are incredible. I mean, this is truly, literally, I was just going to say 2 words, holy cow. This is amazing work, and so thank you so much. But I just also have to thank everybody in this room and an amazing amount of work that has gone into this, from volunteers to our employees at every single level. And so that to me was very overwhelming. So thank you. That's that part. Now for my other part, Scott's going to be super surprised that my first thought was budget. How are we going to pay for all of this? And I appreciated that you said 3 to 5 years. I mean, we are already starting to plan for that. I'm very thankful to hear that questions that I used to feel like I had to ask out loud, you guys are already thinking of before me. Oh, that is so refreshing. So thank you for that, and I do look forward to seeing how our budget is going to now look a little bit different, because our budget was always, again, kind of in silos, and this to me seems like a more comprehensive endeavor. And so I appreciate that, because that speaks directly to resources, and we can't give one initiative to one single person if we're not going to give them the resources and the funding they need to do it. We get that from the federal and state level all the time, these mandates that they don't give us the resources and the funding for. So I love that we are being mindful of that. The second thing I appreciate being mindful of is time sensitive. We did one of the first things us old people did was a time survey, and just the amount of time. And so while we want to appreciate that teacher voice, we also want to say, look, we gave you that opportunity for feedback, now let us do our work so you can do your work. And I think that's reasonable, and I think that's fair, and we've earned that trust. You guys have earned that trust because you were so diligent in getting that feedback, and you continue to get that feedback, so thank you. I'm gonna leave it at that, because I'm just continuing to be overwhelmed and impressed and thankful and just full of gratitude beyond, because it's all about our kids, and every single thing that's happening in here is gonna be great for our kids, so thank you.
Thank you for that. And I just want to, a couple of things you mentioned that I just want to thank so many people, because even for our feedback sessions, there was no extra pay for that. And our district staff, and they led it, and our school leaders, that helped lead all of those sessions. That will help lead us in our compensation teacher feedback sessions. And there's no overtime for that. And I mean, they were so willing to help. And when I would go and still go to Scott to say, you know what, we need to do something now. We need to provide this now for teachers. I wish you could have seen, and I'll do a better job of making sure you're aware of when we're having training, particularly around the new curriculum. I wish you could feel and see, or could have seen the excitement from teachers. The Cantrell building was hopping, right? Every nook and cranny was filled with teachers, and they brought their principals along because we wanted them to come along. I have yet to have a teacher say, Marlena, please stop giving us new current materials and training that go with it. I haven't had that. So when we think about, have the teachers been heard? Do we have enough, have we received enough feedback? Ask any teacher that is engaged in one of our pilots right now, and I think you'll get the answer you're looking for.
The only thing I just want to add that your comment made me think of is the best way to demonstrate that you are listening to people and respecting and valuing their input is to do something with what they told you. And so I think, to your point, it's really time to say, we had all these multiple iterative opportunities, and now we've heard you, and we are going to take it seriously and do something with it, and get your input along the way. But at some point, you have to take action, or people become cynical about, you're asking me again. So I think that this is definitely reflective of what was heard and will be appreciated.
Well, you know, when you bring Director Lemieux to tears, it means that we're definitely on the right path. So I can't accentuate any more than what she has already said. Truly excited and looking forward to September 20th to even feel the energy even more about this unified path that we're on. So well done. Thank you for your presentation, and we'll just look forward to continuing on. Thank you. All right, board directors, next on our agenda are our policy revisions that we have started. And just again, for public's understanding, we have taken on this project for the last several months to really take a hard look at every policy that this board has authority to oversight and approve. And so we have employed the Colorado Association of School Boards, who is able to compare our policies to all the other 172 school districts in the state. And so they're providing us that consultation. I do want to make it clear, too, that these are policies that are our policies that are looked at and reviewed and updated according to the needs of aligning to statute, according to the needs of reflecting best practices or changed practices in our system. So I know some people wonder if we're just throwing out all these brand new policies, and truly that's not the case. We're improving and enhancing policies that have not been looked at for, many have not been looked at for over 20-some years. So it's been quite a project. Very proud of the work that we've accomplished so far. So first policy that we're looking at is the Board of Ethics for School Board Members, policy BCAE1. E stands for exhibit, which is just simply a policy that gives more clarity when we say this notion of code of ethics. It's also a policy that parallels along with conflict of interest kind of issues, and there's a lot of other policies that attached to this, so this is not the sole policy. We have allowed for community feedback and have received quite a bit of feedback on all of these policies tonight. So board directors, I hope you've had a chance to see some of those, some of that feedback to see if it might influence how we may want to make some revisions to this before we make a final approval. So I'll pause with that and ask board directors, as you looked over this as this policy as we're preparing to approve it tonight under second reading, are there questions or suggestions or concerns that you want to talk about before we may have a motion? Director Lung?
I would like to echo language of the last bulletin. Remember always that my first and the greatest concern must be the educational welfare of the student attending public Douglas County School District School.
I'm sorry, the addition that you went, I didn't quite understand what it is.
The last three words, instead of say Douglas County School, I would like to change to Douglas County School District.
Oh, very good, okay. Board directors?
Because I don't in charge of private school students.
Any issue with that? And on that same bullet, I know we did get some feedback from our community regarding adding the word safety as well in that statement. My first and greatest concern must be the safety and educational welfare of students attending. Would anybody have, I mean, that's been our priority. That's something we've had at the top of our list for some time. Would anybody have concerns about us inserting that? Director Holtzman?
So I don't have a concern. I'm fine with inserting that, but I just kind of wanted to let people know that when I read educational welfare, that's inclusive of the learning environment, and safety is the most important part of the learning environment. So when I read that, it already includes safety. If we need to call it out, I'm not opposed to it, but.
And I would agree. That was actually how I interpreted it during our first reading, but then when I saw a community member's perspective that said, where is safety? I thought, if that's going to be interpreted as only educational academics, then I would prefer us to have it clear that that's our intent is safety as well. So that would be the only reason I'm making that suggestion. But I was like you, I assumed it was all encompassing before. So again, I'll pause and ask folks in terms of inserting safety there, are we okay with that? Or would you prefer to define educational welfare somewhere else? Director Lemieux?
I also think that the word welfare implies safety, and we do have quite extensive safety policies. So I think, given that our first charge is education, I don't think safety belongs in this policy per se. I think we do have other policies that very, very clearly and very intentionally address the safety of our students. So I would be okay with putting Douglas County School District schools, But I don't think safety should go there.
Other thoughts? So I'm not seeing consensus to insert that because we are stating that educational welfare is all encompassing of not only safety, but mental wellness. And so there's a lot of other factors that would be included in welfare than simply academic. So deliberately leaving that open would say that we recognize there's far more to welfare than just safety and certainly mental health and other areas. We would need to list a whole laundry list there to make it all-inclusive otherwise. Is that what I'm understanding, Director Vogel?
I'm wondering if, and of course I wasn't here when you guys had this first discussion, but if we just take the word educational out, we say must be the welfare of students attending.
Got a little bit of pushback on that, but yeah, let's see what you're saying. The other feedback we got from community, if you look at the first page, 1, 2, 3, 4, the fourth and the fifth bullet is what I'm looking at. And the fourth bullet says render all decisions based on available facts and my independent judgment. And then the fifth bullet says encourage free expression of opinion by all board members and seek systemic communications between the board, student staff, guardians, et cetera. There was a recommendation that those bullets should be reversed because it seems like that we're rendering decisions based on our independent judgment, and then all of a sudden then we're saying, oh, and by the way, we're going to consider free expression of other directors and the systemic communication with our community. So that was just one of the recommendations I saw from our community that said it flows better if we start out by encouraging free expression and systemic communication and then making our judgment based on that information. So I put that out there for a revision. Any thoughts? Let's see, 1, 2, some head nods being okay, so we'll certainly reverse that. So I will take a motion to approve this policy on second reading with the revisions of reversing the fourth and fifth bullet and adding district to the last bullet.
So moved.
Moved by Holtzman, seconded by Lemieux. Any further discussion? Seeing none, let's vote. Chancho Shore.
Aye.
Holtzman.
Aye.
Lemieux.
Aye.
Lung.
Aye.
Ray, aye, and Vogel.
Aye.
That one passes unanimously. Let's move on then to AC, which is our non-discrimination equal opportunity policy. Again, this was a policy that was very specific in terms of aligning with statute, ensuring that it aligns also to recommendations based on other issues that have occurred throughout the state. Again, I will just pause for a moment and ask, is there any questions regarding this policy at this time? Director Holtzman?
So we did get some community feedback on this. It makes sense to me that there's a part of it that we might want to consider changing just a little bit. Recognizing that transgender is a gender identity and not a sexual orientation. It's a bit confusing that it reads sexual orientation and in parentheses, including transgender. So a recommendation might be to have the class list read race, color, sex, gender expression or gender identity, marital status, sexual orientation, religion, national origin, ancestry, creed, disability, or eligibility for special education services. And I think this might have come from a California non-discrimination law, but I'm not certain. And I also know that our legal counsel needs to weigh in on how it's listed, but I would just somehow like to correct that transgender is a gender identity, not a sexual orientation. It's not correct the way it's written.
Mrs. Klimisch?
I wouldn't necessarily say that it's incorrect. What I would like to say is that, yes, it may be appropriate for us to consider being more specific with respect to referencing transgender status or gender identity, et cetera, in this particular policy. If we do, however, I think we should bring it back because we'll have to resubmit to the Office of Civil Rights for their approval.
So your suggestion would be if we would like to improve the policy with gender identity, gender expression, that we not vote on it tonight, that we give it another chance to give it some revisions before it comes back to us.
That's correct, because we would need to, if it's a revision to the policy that is substantive, it would be my view that we should send it back for OCR approval, which would then mean that we may not get it reviewed and sent back to us for a period of time.
Fair enough. Other comments, Director Vogel and then Director Holtzman?
So,
I'm sorry.
oh, sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah, and I agree, and I would also advocate that we take sex out and use the word gender instead of sex. And I know that that's probably legal in terms of what's in the statute, but I'm sure if we go through all the other stuff, then that'll clear it up. But I would support that with gender, gender identity, or gender expression, and marital status, yep.
Director Holtzman?
So I guess my question is, I know that this policy needs to be revised. I know that what's being presented to us tonight is an improvement that needs to happen. I also would like this change to be made, but if there's some sort of legal or other timeline that we need to comply with, would it be possible to, I guess I'm looking for advice. You know, my preference would be to, you know, pass it correctly the first time, but if we need to pass it like this and then amend it, I'm looking for your advice.
We could do it either way. I think it would be nice to have a policy that was updated, that has been approved by the OCR, which the language of this one has, with the understanding that we'd be seeking an amendment, and then we could come back to the board after it's been approved and make that amendment at that time.
Very good. Good is good. Director Long, did you have a statement?
I thought the language as is written is followed by the state language. The state language, I believe, actually say sex orientations, open pregnancy, including transgender status. So I although I agree with my colleague that those two are different things, but I think this is the legal language that the state is using. So I would suggest pass it as it is and then later get clarification from the state, because I don't want to reinvent the wheel.
Another option, oh, excuse me, I'm sorry.
Director Vogel, then Mary?
I was just gonna say that I agree with that it is state language, but maybe they'll take their cue from us if we do it right.
And Ms. Clemish?
Yes, I was just going to state that the other option would be to see if we could reach out very soon and see if we could come back with a recommendation by the time of our next board meeting, and that might eliminate the need for the second step. And we could just hold and have a second reading again at the next board meeting, with the understanding that in the interim, we could reach out and see if the amendment as proposed would be approved by the Office of Civil Rights.
Well, let's move to a motion. So I'm hearing that a recommendation might be to postpone this until our Tammy Taylor, September 6th meeting, September 3rd meeting, and give Mary Clemish some time to see if she can get amended language that we've communicated to her for that meeting. And then if at that time we still are lacking, then we can go with perhaps a proposal to approve with the intent to amend at a later time. So I will entertain a motion.
Move to table the.
Not table, but postpone. If you table, it's indefinite, but postpone. Go ahead.
I move to postpone the passage of this policy.
Okay, motion made by Director Lung, second by Lemieux. Any further discussion? Seeing none, let's vote. Chancho Shore.
Aye.
Graziano, Holtzman.
Aye.
Lemieux.
Aye.
Lung.
Aye.
Ray, aye, and Vogel.
Aye.
All right. Moving on to our next policy, which is the D section, which are policies that impact budget. Again, I will just reiterate that these are not the only policies that govern our financial practices. There are many superintendent policies that go in greater detail. These policies really are more guiding principles, if you will, and things that we want to continue to monitor and approve as a board. So with that, our first policy is policy DB. And then I guess I want to just pause for a second, Mr. Smith. I know that you also reviewed some of the community feedback. Was there anything there that caused you to think that there were revisions that needed to be made to any of these policies, or was it more just the communication of this is covered in other policies or in superintendent policies?
Thank you, Director. I believe it's the latter. There were some comments around conflicts of interest in terms of procurement and budgeting and those types of things, and we have those covered in other policies with the board governance as well. I'm comfortable with the policies that we have, the superintendent policies around conflict of interest and competitive bidding and the like. I think it's always a delicate balance on ensuring protection of taxpayer resources and competitive bidding, all of those types of areas, and efficient operations of the school district. And so we use the Fiscal Oversight Committee to bring these policies to as well, so we'll be sure to have the conversation with them. But I'm satisfied with the changes that are reflected in here.
Mr. Smith, Director Lemieux?
As Mr. Smith commented, we did get feedback from the Fiscal Oversight Committee, and the only feedback we got was on DIE. Just wondering, does the charter school process need to be incorporated? And your response to that, Mr. Smith, do you mind?
Well, let's wait.
Or do we want to wait?
Yeah, when we get there, then we can incorporate.
So I have two questions, and one will be about DIE, and then the other one will be about DJ.
Very good. All right. Let's entertain a motion to approve policy DB.
I move that we approve policy DB.
Second.
Moved by Lemieux, seconded by Holtzman. Further discussion? Director Vogel?
Well, I had a question about it. I mean, I know that FOC is looking at this whole SBB philosophy. Is this premature, given that they're doing that? Or is it's not? Okay.
Mr. Smith?
I don't believe it's premature in that we're, as shocking as it may sound, we're about 3 months from kicking off budget season for next year. And given the strategic plan and the timeline, I know to Director Chancho Shore's point, I was here in January before the strategic plan was kicked off, and we had made a bunch of changes to move towards more equitable distribution of resources. And then I followed it up by saying, and next year is going to be all of the final changes. And then, of course, the strategic plan launched, and we have to make sure that we do it right and get input from our building leaders, get input from the FOC. So my belief is that this year we're going to take another step towards equity and funding, but we will largely be using the same budgeting model because there's really no practical way to make a huge course shift in our organization and a culture shift as well in the amount of time that we have. So I think updating DBR to reflect current practice and eliminating some of the outdated language is definitely helpful because it guides our work over the next year.
Some openness that as FOC takes on the task of studying SBB, that there may be amended policies that come the following year. All right, further discussion, Director Holtzman?
Just wanted to let Director Vogel know too that we did discuss that at our work session, and no, it's okay. That's why we added all decisions shall be made to promote equitable distribution of resources, because that was part of it, so.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Chancho Shore?
Aye.
Holtzman?
Aye.
Lemieux?
Aye.
Lung?
Aye.
Ray, aye, and Vogel.
Aye.
Okay, DBR, we've kind of heard a little bit of a teaser about it. It goes into more definition about site-based budgeting. And as Director Lemieux and Mr. Smith stated, is that will be studied this year and that this may be impacted once the FOC has had a chance to study that. But for now, this is updated according to our current practices. Is there a motion to approve?
Move we pass DBR as written.
Second.
All right. Motion made by Lemieux, seconded by Holtzman. Any further discussion? All right, seeing none. Chancho Shore?
Aye.
Holtzman?
Aye.
Lemieux? Lung?
Aye.
Ray, aye, and Vogel.
Aye.
Next policy is DJ, which is guides district purchasing.
DI.
Oh, my apologies. DIE, thank you. I forget die and audit is all in the same sentence. All right. DIE discusses the process for our auditing. Questions, Director Lemieux?
So the only feedback we got from the FOC was, do we need to include the charter school process in this particular policy? And I would ask that Mr. Smith be able to answer that, please.
Mr. Smith?
Thank you. So all of our charter schools do have to get independently audited every year, just as the school district. The audit is independent, though, so it is not conducted by our auditor. They are included in our audits at the end of the year, and the term that they use are component units. So they are in the back of the audit. We are relying on the information supplied to us by the charter schools and their independent auditors, who are definitely qualified to do this work. So I have no problem including the charter schools. I think what would need to be made clear would be that the audit information of the component units is included in the audit, but it is not performed by our auditors, and that expectation should not be made in the policy, because that is not how charter school financials are audited every year.
Dr. Lemieux?
Well, given that these are district policies and we, again, are not responsible for the audit of the charters, they have their own independent auditor, I'm wondering if that might muddy up our policies to include such language. I just think that's additional information that we don't cover anyway. So I personally would say the answer to FOC question is actually no, we don't need that in our policy because they have their own auditors. So if you're comfortable with that, or I'll defer again to Mr. Smith.
Mr. Smith?
So our auditors won't issue an opinion without the component units included, because they are a part of the school district. So we do work through various issues with audits. So as an example, for this year, we're working through with Apex and how they'll be included as a component unit, because they did have a charter with our district, and there were funds flowing through our district to the charter school in terms of startup grants and those types of things. So our auditors are actually on top of that, trying to work with us in order to get that appropriately reflected in the audit. So there is definitely assurance from our auditors, who are employed by the board, they do work for the board, that those component units and their audited statements will be reflected in our financial statements, and any areas that we would not be in compliance with would be noted in the letter from the auditors to the board at the time the audit is issued.
I don't know the question or the answer. I know the question, but I'm wondering if our charters have replacement policies for audits, for their annual audits, or because I think Director Lemieux makes a good point. Is if we start adding charter into these policy, it becomes a little confusing. Why this one and not the other one? But I'm wondering if we have replacement policies that our charters submit regarding their own annual audits, which is I don't see Danny, our go-to person here. Scott, any thoughts about that?
I don't know the answer to that specific question. What I would say is that the charter schools do have to comply with the financial transparency requirements from the state of Colorado, and one of those requirements is posting your annual audit to your website to be reviewed. So they're definitely getting done, and there's definitely statute that's requiring them to do, but I don't know the answer specifically to the policy question.
Director Lemieux?
So I'm wondering if in number 5, the auditor's opinion on the financial statements, including charter compliance, or, I mean, where would you even add that language, again, to not confuse district policy with charter policy? So I don't know, where would you suggest adding any language of the sort?
Mr. Smith?
Thank you very much. I wouldn't add it there, because the auditor's opinion is based on, is staff, for all material purposes, accurately reflecting the activities of the school district? And that's what our auditors are auditing. They're not auditing the charter schools, so they're not going to give an opinion on the charter school financials. I think if it's something that the board wanted to include, you could add another bullet that says something along the lines of information supplied by the component units is included in the audit, something to that effect, because it's not our information. It's not, our auditors aren't giving an opinion on it. It is simply included in the school district's overall audit as information in the back of the CAFR.
And I guess my only thought is I would be cautious, because I think given that's a significant addition, I think that we would want to talk with our charter community about. We'd also, for me, I would want to know if there's replacement policies. I do respect the fact there's state statute that we all comply with, so I'm a little bit queasy of throwing that in here at the midnight hour. I think that if we wanted to amend this policy again down the road, because we felt like that there wasn't enough language, that described the charter's piece of the puzzle, then I think we can come back to that, but I would recommend we forego that for now.
I move that we accept policy DIE as written.
Second?
Motion made by Lemieux, second by Lung. Any further discussion? All right, Chancho Shore.
Aye.
Holtzman. Lemieux.
Aye.
Lung.
Aye.
Ray, aye, and Vogel.
Aye.
All right. Now we're moving on to DJ, District Purchasing. Director Lemieux.
So again, I'm just going to read exactly the question that someone from Fiscal Oversight Committee sent us. The sole source section looks pretty loose. I would think that the district would be compelled to use competitive process with public funds. The sole source process should be used on rare occasion. I refer to the financial rep section that was done for the bonds. There was no need to sole source that service if technical professional services need to be done on a multi-year bid to ensure some cost savings and continuity. That makes sense. Normally, if a professional technical provider is helping with an RFP, et cetera, type work upfront, they would not be able to bid on the contract for services. That would help stop the I'm doing this for free with a wink and a nod. And I know Mr. Smith has seen this question, so he can answer it.
You bet. Go for it.
So I would say overall, we very rarely use the sole source provision in here. I think our procurement team led by Lindsay Bergerman takes great pride in how much her team can save the district every year. We had a presentation at the Fiscal Oversight Committee before school ended where her team just in the last year saved the district over $1 million based on competitive bidding, negotiation, those types of things. So sole source is truly used when there is a standardization reason, right? If we have one set of controls, and this is in Mr. Cosgrove's area across the entire district, and we need to replace controls at a school, we're going to use the same vendor that we've used at all of our schools from a standardization standpoint. It is definitely not our prerogative to go the sole source route unless we have to. In terms of the bond deal, those were not sole source bids. And I think what the FOC member is referring to is on the front of the RFP, the request for proposal, it says this is not a competitive bid. That does not mean it is not being competitively bid out. What it means is that we're not compelled to take the lowest price, because what we want to do is ensure that the expertise of the people who are bidding, the value we need from our vendors, the relationships they have, the industry knowledge they have are the best value for the school district. Of course, whenever we get a proposal, we do negotiate with our underwriters. If you run into our underwriters, you can talk to them about how I negotiated our prices down on the discount they take on all the bonds we sold. Same thing with our financial advisors. But it's not a non-competitive bid in the sense that we're giving it straight to one firm. What we're saying is we want to hear how you can add value to the Douglas County School District. And if the value you add costs slightly more, but the return on investment is there, we're free to make that choice because it's not solely based on lowest price. It's based on what can the district get with a partnership with this vendor.
Yes, please.
Awesome, and I truly appreciate Lindsay. She's done amazing work, but what if we don't have a Lindsay? And the concern is the loose language. Do you feel like the language is strong enough that the assumption will be people will follow in Lindsay's footsteps, that we are going to use that sole bid very rarely as suggested by our FOC member?
I am comfortable. I think all of us who work here in education and the Douglas County School District in the finance office, our job is to stretch every dollar as far as we can go. And I'll brag on my team a little bit. It's a team of professionals who truly take their work to heart and want to make sure that they execute correctly. I understand the concern, but it's not an area that I think is open to a lot of abuse. I think it's very clear, anything above $50,000, we have competitive processes for. Anything under that, we have multiple bids for. Anything above $500,000, which was lowered from $750,000, comes to the board. So there is still oversight. We have budget checks built in through our financial system to ensure that the money does exist within the budget that was already approved by the board in order to procure that service. Multiple layers of approvals. So I'm comfortable in the internal controls. I think we had a new auditor this year, and one of the things that they audit is internal controls, and we had no findings on that. And so I understand the concern, but I don't think the opportunity based on where our purchasing thresholds are set right now, the opportunity for abuse just doesn't exist. And again, I go back to it's that delicate balance of how do we run the school district efficiently, but have the right checks in place to make sure that the situation you're describing doesn't happen.
Also would just remind that there is a DJR policy, regulatory policy that I think Mr. Smith and his department can actually drill down even more detail to do the protective kinds of things that we need to make sure are in place. So I would suggest that there is a need for that would show up in that particular policy.
I move that we approve DJ as written.
Second.
Lemieux motion, Holtzman second. Any further discussion? Seeing none. Chancho Shore.
Aye.
Holtzman.
Aye.
Lemieux.
Aye.
Lung.
Aye.
Ray, aye, and Vogel.
Aye.
All right. We're going to move on to our e-policies. These include security access to buildings, nutritious food choices, and safeguarding personal identifying information. And again, for our public, I would just again remind that there's many policies that are in other sections that speak to things like security, protection, visitors. We have a whole policy on the appropriateness of what visitors can actually come into our schools. So again, I would just put that out there so people don't think that this is the only policy that speaks to that. I think this policy speaks more to the specific notion of accessing a school building and also just making sure that we are routinely inspecting it for any kind of hazards or concerns. Any questions before we entertain a motion? Director Lung?
President Ray, or maybe this one is for Dr. Tucker. Just want to make sure that this policy cover for people who walk into a school and trying to videotape, assembly or conference, to make sure that this does not happen easily, because we certainly don't want any stranger able to walk in with no student in the school, able to stay there for a couple hours and making video of our student.
And Dr. Tucker, I'll let you respond in just a second, but Dr. Lung, I also remind you that there's a policy KI that is specifically titled Visitors to the Schools, and it does really outline who is eligible to enter our schools. But I will let Dr. Tucker respond to your concern about videotaping, someone walking in and videotaping our students. Dr. Tucker?
Right. That policy should address exactly what Director Long is stating, but we've also have to involve the human element to continue to engage in conversations with our staff members in buildings to remind them, to ensure we're using the Raptor system or whatever check-in system, and reminding our visitors of privacy statements as well. And I think that's what Director Long is getting to. We cannot, without parental permission, photograph or videotape students.
Very good. So I think we will look forward to Policy KI, even giving more detail about those privacy statements for our visitors that come into our building, because that is critical, I know, for all of us. I'll pause. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion.
I move that we accept policy ECA/ECAB as written.
Second.
Motion made by Lemieux, second by Vogel. Any further discussion? Seeing none. Chancho Shore?
Aye.
Holtzman?
Aye.
Lemieux?
Aye.
Aye.
Ray, aye, and Vogel.
Aye.
That motion passes unanimously. Moving on to nutritious food choices. Any questions? EFEA, nutritious food choices. Director Holtzman?
Yeah, so I asked for more information on this one and got it, and I might possibly be more confused than I was before. But so there's somewhere in here that refers to the beverage policies. Here it is, adopted by the State Board of Education. So I looked at those, and I got two documents. There was a second document that I assume is a complement to the Colorado Department of Education, because the first one that's clearly them doesn't really give any concrete details about what, for instance, could be sold at a high school basketball game, Gatorade, soda. So I looked at the accompanying document that I got sent, and there's different requirements. And if you look, there's elementary, middle school, high school. For high school, for instance, it says that carbonated beverages per 12 fluid ounce can have less than or equal to 60 calories. So I looked up Coca-Cola and it has 140 calories. So I'm just a bit confused because I know that we have vending machines that this is allowed. My only issue with this is I don't want to enact a policy that our volunteers at sporting events or whatever, are violating the policy, because it's quite common that they would sell soda or Gatorade. And then the Colorado Department of Education also has a part that says district boards may permit the sale of other beverages at school events where parents and other adults are in attendance, and it goes on and on. So I don't know if we need to have that be a part of it. I just feel like maybe Mr. Craig would be able to give us advice about this, but.
Mr. Craig.
Welcome. I didn't
realize you
see
were
you
in the
there.
room.
Thank you for being
Wow,
here.
this is vision. Please, thank you. This is Brent Craig, our Director of Nutrition Services.
Well, don't feel alone. Your confusion is with everybody.
Well, thank you, and thank you
So
for being here.
there's two important things you have to look at. Is you have a federal policy that they had to melt in with the Colorado policy. The legislature put it together. And what we're doing is we're trying to enact that in a way that meets all of these guidelines and stuff. So you started talking about, the nutritional pieces and stuff like that, how many calories per ounces and stuff like that. What you're looking at, though, is that the extended day does not apply to foods, okay? And that's part of what the Colorado Department of Education says. Okay, I'm gonna get there. And so in an extended day, so when we're at a football game or fundraisers after the school day, and they defined school day as up to midnight the night before, but except for that and I'll read that too, is that does not meet smart snacks. Food and nutrition standards may be sold 30 minutes after the end of the school day. So I think it's important that we put that in this policy. If we could come back and just insert that into it, because that's part of what the Colorado Department of Education is given to us. The other part of this is that you started to read it, but you didn't get there all the way. The State Board of Education or District Boards of Education may permit the sale of beverages at school-related events where parents and other adults are in attendance. Such activities include, but are not limited to, selling food and beverages at events such as sporting events, school plays, band concerts. So it covers, and it doesn't specifically make a long list, but it covers things where parents are involved as well. And from that perspective, you can sell those things, and it doesn't limit there's no limitation on what you can sell. Because that was one of the first things we fought, we got into, was that parents were up in arms with us because they couldn't sell Coke or Pepsi or those types of things. We don't sell those in our vending machines, by the way. We have very strict policy, and I manage that policy, or that contract with Pepsi. We sell 75,000 cases a year, and about 50,000 of that is water. I'm proud of what these kids drink. And a lot of it's non-nutritive or non-calorie type beverages and stuff. Gatorade, Zero, those kinds of things.
Mr. Craig, I think you made a suggestion of insertion into the
There's two
policy.
insertions that I think you could put in.
Can you clarify those again for us?
And I can give this to you. The extended school day does not apply to foods. And then
It's actually opposite of what this policy currently says.
Exactly,
Okay.
right.
Okay.
And then the second one is that district boards of education may permit the sale of beverages at events where parents and community are involved.
I move we postpone this until clarification
So until we get the revision that you've just
Till we get the
suggested.
revisions.
I'll be glad to help you on that.
Thank you.
second
Appreciate it. All right, so motion's been made to postpone this policy till September 3rd with the revisions that are being recommended. It's been seconded by Vogel. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Chancho Shore.
Aye.
Holtzman.
Aye.
Lemieux.
Aye.
Lung.
Aye.
Ray, aye, and Vogel.
Aye.
All right. Moving on to EHC, Safeguarding Personal Identifying Information. There's no questions. We'll entertain a motion.
So move.
So moved, Director Long,
Second.
seconded by Holtzman. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Chancho Shore.
Aye.
Holtzman.
Aye.
Lemieux.
Aye.
Lung.
Aye.
Ray, aye, and Vogel.
Aye.
Next is just one policy. It is in the section F, specifically for naming school facilities.
Move to approve as written.
Motion made by Vogel, seconded by Lemieux. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Chancho Shore.
Aye.
Holtzman.
Aye.
Lemieux.
Aye.
Lung.
Aye.
Ray, aye, and Vogel.
Aye.
Next policy is a first reading of tobacco-free schools. Mrs. Klimish, I don't know if you want to give us a quick overview of this. And again, this is a first reading. We are not in a position to approve this as of yet.
So Director Ray, members of the Board of Education, this policy was carefully reviewed by Nancy Ingalls and her team, and the proposed revisions included in here were made not only by CASB's reviewer, but also by Nancy's team or Ms. Engel's team. I want to point out that we see in here that we have specified vaping as being use as considered in the term use. And that you can also see that we've identified an electronic device that can be used to deliver nicotine to the person inhaling from the device, including but not limited to electronic cigarettes, et cetera, as also being prohibited. There was a question raised with respect to whether or not we needed to specify, I think from a board member, whether or not we needed to specify that advertising regarding certain tobacco products would be prohibited in terms of our revenue programs. And in fact, I just want to point out that we do have a policy, KHB and KHBR, which specifically address that kind of circumstance. And that policy provides that any kind of revenue enhancement programs need to be consistent with districts' behavioral expectations and core values. So I talked about this with a couple of the members of the administrative team who are responsible for implementing our revenue enhancements. And they assured me that they simply do not allow for any advertisements that would endorse or promote smoking or tobacco or the use of tobacco or any related types of products that would be prohibited by this policy.
Director Vogel.
So I'd be curious to know what others think about this. One of the things that I would love to see included in this is information about cessation for kids with tobacco use and
Say that again.
cessation, things to help kids quit. And I think having it written into our policy would be a good thing so that schools had resources available for kids. Couple of statistics, Colorado tops the nation in teens' use of e-cigarettes. And the state has what's known as the Quit Line, and it's a free service. In 2018 saw quadruple number of minors calling that line. And so, and I know that they've had some public service things associated with that, and so I think it's helped. And I think that it would not be inappropriate to have it in our policy that we have something, not with specifics, obviously, but something that relates to, schools have resources or information or programs available for kids that need help.
Ms. Clemish?
I do want to point out that Ms. Engels and her team very specifically included in the responsive measures taken, which was their addition, to point out that before disciplinary measures were going to be considered, that there would be responsive measures for students who violate the policy may include substance abuse screening, brief intervention, and/or referral to treatment. And so I do think that that referral to treatment really is inclusive, not only of things which may be available at the school, but which may also be available outside of the school setting.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Commissioner, where is that stated? I don't see that in this policy that we're viewing.
It's on page 2 of 3.
Oh, I see it, thank you.
Yeah.
And if I can.
Director Vogel.
And I'm not even really talking about necessarily kids that get in trouble or under discipline. I'm just talking about a general education about the effects of this stuff and opportunities for kids to smoke, whether that's part of health curriculum or whatever, but just for the general population.
Dr. Tucker?
Yes, Director Vogel, to your concern, our next parent university, which will be conducted with Skyridge Medical Center, will take place on September 25th at 6 p.m. And the seminar's topic is the youth vaping epidemic.
So it sounds like Director Vogel is suggesting that we include some kind of a preventative statement in this as well. So we've certainly talked about the responsive if a student violates, but I think Director Vogel is saying we should get a head start of that and include that there's some kind of prevention strategy that we take seriously to help the student not even get to this point. Am I capturing that correctly?
I think so. And not necessarily just, yes, prevention, but then also information about helping to quit.
Okay.
You know, whether that's posters in the school and I mean, we wouldn't put specifics like that in our policy, but I can talk to Ms. Clemish about that and see because I don't even have any language about it, but.
So prior to second reading, we'll take a look at that. Director Vogel, Mrs. Clemish can maybe talk about if that is a place. I know we've got a student wellness policy we may want to look at as well that may spell that out more appropriately in that policy than this one, but we will consider that before we do second reading of this. Director Chancho-Shore?
I'd piggyback it and I'd agree, because of the first sentence, in order to promote general health, welfare, and well-being. It indicates that you're promoting general health, so it might be included right there in the first paragraph.
Okay, very good. All right, we're going to move us on. Director Lung, final comment before this is just a first reading. It's not at an approval state yet.
Right, I'm just trying to see maybe in 1D, would like to suggest to change it to at a district and school sanctioned activity or event. So add the word district in there to make sure that.
Okay, so one recommendation, looking at district in there, that's on 1D, Mary, in case you're trying to track.
Hold on one second.
Director Vogel, did you?
At school or district sanctioned activity or event?
Yes, that's the recommendation that.
School property. If it's, because this is what I worry about, is if it's a district event that maybe isn't on district property, but it's at another area, then we're kind of infringing on people's rights as adults to legally consume tobacco products, right? I mean, that's just something to think about.
All right, so let's ponder that.
But school events can also be the same.
Right. I want to leave that for now. I think that's been heard, and we will ponder that before second reading at our next meeting. Let's move on to the next first reading, which is student wellness policy ADF. And again, I don't, Ms. Clemish, anything that you want to highlight in this particular policy?
Only that I ditto my prior comments with respect to the review by appropriate teams to provide input regarding this particular policy and the proposed revisions.
Director Holtzman?
So I had a couple of questions from community members about including specific things like stress reduction techniques and anti-bullying measures. And I guess my question really is more for Ms. Ingalls and staff. If we could possibly make the policy a little bit more specific and include social emotional learning, incorporating, and then it's my understanding there's 5 areas within social emotional learning that are pretty well identified. And I think it would cover, if we said, I'll read the 5: self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, responsible decision-making. I think that specific things like stress reduction and anti-bullying would be covered by those 5 things. But I guess it's a question for Ms. Ingalls if she thinks that would help the policy and it would cover those things that the community was concerned about.
I will take that suggestion to her, and we'll come back with a recommendation before the next meeting and the next second reading.
And again, just another reminder that we do have an ADFR policy, a regulatory policy. I think what Director Holtzman describing is perfect in this policy because it just identifies the categories that we want to pay attention to. But our ADFR may drill down more to specifics that's, again, a superintendent policy. Just a quick question. In the third paragraph, there was something that says along the lines of district nutritionist, it lists a bunch of things, and it says student wellness policy for the district. I think that should be student wellness plan, because I think this is the student wellness policy. That's 1, 2, 3 paragraphs, just to take a look at that to see if we really meant the word policy. It's just a minor thing. And then we also ask ourselves the question with first readings, if there's other groups that we think should see these policies presented, in addition to the fact that we'll send it out to our community. But I'm wondering if there's thoughts about, are there some of our committees that you think should see this policy on student wellness? I see Director Chandrashore, you nodding, and I was thinking DAC. And the student advisory group as well, so maybe DAC and student advisory group should see this policy before we put it back on our agenda for second reading, okay? All right, any other discussion regarding the first reading of this one? Then the last first reading is DN, which is regarding school properties disposal procedure. I know that Mr. Smith has had a look at this. Any comments, Mr. Smith, regarding this one? Any questions, board directors, regarding this particular policy? Director Holtzman?
I just have one question. Sorry, I lost it here. Just for clarification, is it obvious that it says public school purposes? Is that obvious that it would include things like public school administrative, transportation, those kinds of uses? Okay, that's what I thought.
Okay, very good. Any other questions, reactions? So this policy we'll see on September 3rd as written, unless there's last minute thoughts from our community in terms of responding to that. All right, so that completes our policy work for tonight. The next item is board action on a parent complaint in student matter. This issue was discussed in executive session to ensure that there's no adverse effect to the student that has this particular matter. The board has had conversation to understand the process. We've reviewed the superintendent's process in terms of investigating the student matter and coming to the conclusion that he did. Is there any further questions or a motion regarding this particular item?
I'd like to make a motion. I move to affirm the decision made by Superintendent Dr. Tucker regarding an individual student matter where public disclosure would adversely affect the person or persons involved.
Second.
A motion been made by Holtzman and seconded by Vogel. Any further discussion? Director Lung?
I would like to recuse myself.
Director Lung, we approve your recusal of yourself. And again, just for community's understanding, there are times that board members need to do that if they have a conflict of interest or if they are tied too closely to the issue. So we accept Director Lung's recusal. I would also just say that I think one of the things we walked away with, and we certainly heard earlier tonight, many of us making some advocacy points around student voice and ensuring that we really do have a clean and clear process of how student voice is being heard. And I think, if anything, I think this particular issue even for us exemplifies that we want to make sure that that process is clear for our students when they need to appeal a decision that has been made. So I think it ties in well with some of the conversation we've had tonight. So with that, I'll take a vote. Chancho Shore?
Aye.
Holtzman?
Aye.
Lemieux?
Aye.
Lung has recused himself. Ray, aye. And Vogel?
Aye.
Okay, that motion passes. Next on our agenda is Board Committee Cross Liaisons. Director Holtzman has graciously drafted a resolution regarding some concern around whether board committees should be required to attend other board committees in a liaison role. Director Holtzman, I don't know if there's anything that you want to capture regarding your resolution.
So I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong or something needs to be changed or added, this resolution applies to our board committees. So that's LRPC, FOC, DAC, and the Student Advisory Group. We also currently have an ad hoc committee, the Mill Bond Oversight Committee. It applies to liaisons that the board committees, some of them had appointed to attend other board committee meetings. Some of those board committees had received them as members, as voting members. And so this was just to address concerns that had come up, that board members need to take responsibility, and it's in the resolved part of it, to provide regular communication to the whole board regarding the work of the committee assigned, and in other words, shouldn't let that fall on a committee member. That the board member liaisons facilitate communication and collaboration between board committees when the board determines that task sharing between committees would reinforce the wholeness of the board's job. The role of liaison between committees is solely the responsibility of the board member liaison, and therefore board committees will not have official committee member liaisons to other board committees, with the understanding that all meetings of board committees are open to the public, and therefore any committee members can attend any board committee meeting. It doesn't change what would happen other than clarifies the expectation that board members have the responsibility of informing the board what goes on in their committees and asking for direction if they feel like one committee needs to work with another committee and that sort of thing. And just another clarification, the Mill Bond Oversight Committee, we approved membership of that committee, which includes some people who serve on FOC, LRPC, DAC, but they are actual members of the Mill Bond Oversight Committee. They're not just liaisons. They are members. It was approved by our board. So it doesn't apply to the people who've been approved as members. And the same situation with CART. That's a separate thing. And if that needs to be clarified, I'm happy to try to do that.
I guess one clarification I would make, Dr. Holtzman, is where it says will not have official committee member liaisons. The only committee right now that does that is our FOC, and they refer to them as representatives, not liaisons. So I don't know if we need to clarify that, because we don't use the term committee member liaison really in any of our committees. So I'm just questioning that.
So I would just respond and say LRPC does have, and I'm not sure how they refer to it, but they do appoint people to go to FOC. I'm not sure if they do it for other committees, but so yeah, we can talk about representatives or change that wording.
It seems confusing when we use liaison for us as well as liaison for a committee. And like I said, I haven't seen that term used in LRPC. Director Lemieux?
Actually, the FOC has, I'm sorry, I haven't looked it up, but they actually, their liaisons from the DAC and from the LRPC are voting members. And again, they didn't go through a membership process. They just volunteered to be liaisons. And I have a serious problem with them being voting members on a committee that they were not elected to be on. So, and they didn't go through any kind of process to get on that. So, other than just volunteering within their committees. So, I support this resolution as written.
And again, I would just read that from the FOC's membership bylaws, it says, further, it's the intention of the board, one member of the FOC is also a member of the board's long-range planning committee, and another member of the FOC is also a member of the board's district accountability committee. The members from the board's long-range planning and DAC that are appointed to the FOC will be nominated by their respective committees. So again, I guess my...
So rather than using the word liaison, they made them members, and really, they're just liaisons from the FOC and the LRPC.
We're saying that, but I just think we have to be careful if we want to be clear, what is it that we have issue or concern with? That it's not that, I'm just a little hung up on the word liaison, if you will.
So can I just get some clarification? Because when I take this back to the FOC, the expectation is they rewrite this bylaw, that an FOC, LRPC member and a DAC member cannot be members of the FOC. They already have committees that they're members on, and they should not be voting members.
No, I'm not disagreeing with the resolution yet. I'm just disagreeing with the wording liaison, which I would just put official committee member representative, because to me, that's what they're doing, is they're saying you are the representative from FOC to go to LRPC. They're not saying you are the liaison to go. So that's my only clarification. I do have, and I heard Director Holtzman, you differentiated with that the MBOC is different in terms of that this would not necessarily apply to them. So what I'm struggling with is this a resolution issue for us? Is it simply that we want to direct our board liaisons to clean up the language in our bylaws? And do we need a resolution to do that? Can I say to you, Anne Marie, Director Lemieux, that the board no longer has this intention in your bylaws? Because it says right now that further it's the intention of the board. That's not our intention anymore. And so we would say that we think that should be deleted. And that to me seems like it would take care of the issue, because we're basically saying that we no longer see the need for an FOC person to be designated to go to DAC or designated to go to an LRPC. Where I think if we do approve this resolution, we have this ripple effect to say, well, why is MBOC different? Why is CART different? You know, when we do indeed approve and assign, we have this resolution that says we don't want those liaison type roles, but yet on those committees we do. So I think it's a little confusing. Director Lemieux?
So can I get clarification? Do we have, in my understanding, we have an FOC member who goes to LRPC, and we have an FOC member who goes to DAC as liaisons. Are you saying we should not do that with any of our committees anymore, and I should ask the FOC to revise their bylaw to reflect that there are no longer liaisons between committees, that the board members are the liaisons between the committees?
I'm just saying, I think FOC is the only committee I see that actually has in their bylaws that they're designating people to go to other committees. And the bylaw is incorrect, and right. Yeah. But it's not in their bylaws though. So I'm just saying that the bylaw, is it a bylaw issue or is it a practice issue? And if it's a practice issue, we simply say that that's not the intent of the board. This bylaw clearly says it's our intention, which I don't think it is. Dr. Lung?
Well, I agree with President Ray's interpretations, because in the DAC bylaw or in the long-range planning committee bylaw, they do not accept a member that's sent from the other committee as their voting member. There's no such things.
Right.
Okay? We had a practice before that is not actually supported by the bylaw of the DAC and the long-range planning committee. So this seems to be a practice that the board can easily say that we don't want any more So that would take care of DAC and the Long Range Planning Committee. And in fact, this practice never exists in the Student Advisory Committee. Okay, so I think that just by amending the FOC bylaw, we'll take care of that instead of having a resolutions in this legislature. Maybe the board in here, in this diocese, express this is what we want the FOC to do. And then have the liaison to go there and say that, hey, this is the wish of the board right now. I think that should be sufficient.
Dr. Lemieux and then Director Holtzman?
Sure. And I have no problem doing that. I do have a question. This whole liaison notion came from an ad hoc committee that we had at one time. And then when we dissolved that ad hoc committee, that's when we started the liaison process between committees. My question is there a resolution from that we need to look at and maybe dissolve that resolution rather than writing a new resolution? I just want to make sure that we don't already have a resolution in place that says we want liaisons. This one would take care of it that says we don't want them.
Yeah.
So I think we need to look into that before we approve that. So maybe we postpone.
That was an ad hoc group that had a sunset, and we sunset them. We completed their work. There's no resolution. There's no active resolution for that.
Then how did we get the liaisons?
We created that ad hoc group by appointing liaisons, if you will, or representatives to that group. But that group is since no longer active.
Okay, so I'm not making myself clear. We had the ad hoc group, and then that group dissolved. But after that, then we chose to continue a liaison process because they felt that there was benefit in long-range planning, FOC and DAC having some continuity of understanding of what's going on, having their liaisons. How did that happen?
Yeah, it may be practice, but it certainly is not in a resolution. That we didn't write a resolution that said that this was the intent. So it may have been just some discussion or conversation that we had.
Okay, maybe I'll go back and make sure there's not a resolution about it.
Presently, we just basically sunset the joint subcommittee and said that they are done as of that particular day. We do not ever pass anything and sanction something called liaison between different board committee. In fact, as I said, Long Range Planning Committee and DAC never have that into their official bylaw. And I think we just condone that practice in the past year or two. I don't think we officially sanctioned it or have a resolutions to say that to appoint you as a liaison. There's no resolutions to appoint anybody to be a liaison whatsoever, as I recall, ever since I sit at this board. We only appoint committees member, we never appoint liaisons.
Dr. Holtzman, sorry.
So I support the change, which is basically, for most of our committees, a change in practice, because LRPC does, they do like nominate and vote on someone to go to FOC and DAC and whatever. So if the board is reaching consensus, I just want to make sure that it's not just the FOC that we're guiding to change bylaws, it's everybody to change practice. And it's a pretty minor change in some ways, but the intent behind it was just to decrease any confusion between communication, which there has been some examples of, and also to kind of take on and make us as board members responsible for being liaisons to these committees, that we do need to be the people that are communicating what's happening with our committees and having discussions like this, if we want them to work together, that we need to take that on and not leave that to our volunteers. So in whatever way that happens is great. And if it doesn't happen, I don't think it's the end of the world. It's just something we had talked about, so.
All right, so are we a consensus that we communicate to our committees in terms of practice and if there needs to be bylaw changes, or is there someone that wants to make a motion for this resolution? That's kind of that's the crossroad we're at right now. So I'm going to go with, first of all, just looking to see if there's consensus. I see nods. All right, so by consensus, we will communicate, liaisons communicate with your committees that that practice is different, and then Director Lemieux will do some work with FOC specifically, since this is stated in their bylaws. It's no longer accurate. All right, moving on then to resolution for board committees' areas of focus. So we have a resolution, again, this is something we do annually. We have 3-4 attachments that show what each of our committees we've prioritized. This was work we did at the board retreat, and now it's just formalized so that we can move forward and actually approve those priorities for our committees. Any questions about that? So I entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion made by Vogel, seconded by Lung. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Chancho Shore.
Aye.
Holtzman.
Aye.
Lemieux.
Aye.
Lung.
Aye.
Ray, aye, and Vogel. All right. Next is board reports, and I just will quickly say agenda planning this Friday. And Vice President Vogel, any reports from you?
I don't have any.
All right, none. Any other board reports for the good of the group tonight? All right. Seeing none, I will tell you that we do have a need to continue with an executive session. And let me get to the statement. We do need to hold conference with, again, with our board's attorneys to receive legal advice concerning pending legal questions pursuant to CRS 246402-4B, including questions related to charter contracts issues. Again, during these sessions, an executive session, the board is not allowed to adopt any proposed policy, resolution, regulation, or take any formal action. Is there a motion? And the motion should include adjournment of open regular session to move into executive session.
So moved.
Move to adjourn regular meeting and go into executive session.
Vogel made the motion, and Lung, was that a second?
Second, yes.
All right. Further discussion, simply Superintendent Tucker will be joining us, as well as Ted Knight, Mary Clemish, and phone conference via, or with Kristen Edgar via phone conference from Kaplan and Ernest. Any further discussion? All right, seeing none, let's vote. Chancho Shore.
Aye.
Holtzman.
Aye.
Lemieux.
Aye.
Lung.
Aye.
Ray, aye, and Vogel.
Aye.
Okay, we are adjourned and moving into executive session in the superintendent's conference room.